Chapter 607, You're All Here, Huh? To describe Xianxia as indescribably beautiful and striking would only portray part of her. In his entire life, Meng Hao had never seen a more beautiful woman. This was not a matter of her being one of the most beautiful. Any other woman beside her paled in comparison, reduced to a supporting role. She wore a light red gown with a wide smile. Her every move was dazzling, and her body emanated a unique aura, resembling both the air of a demon and a spirit. Her body had become something like a precious material, something that stood out from the masses, and the aura she emitted filled the entire area. Her current body belonged to no one but herself. This was the true Xianxia. Due to her earlier fall in Cultivation base and her work for the demon immortal sect, her immortal realm base had degraded to the edge of spirit severing. She usually revealed only nascent soul power, but she had clearly succeeded with the demon immortal body. Her cultivation base was restoring itself rapidly. Soon, she would have the power of an immortal again. When the time came, the others would return to the lands of South Heaven, but she would leave by a different route. She would return to the demon immortal sect of the Ninth Mountain and Sea. There was even a high likelihood that the cultivators of the demon immortal sect were already gathering at some unknown location to prepare to receive her. Upon hearing Xixiang's request, Meng Hao's expression did not change at all. He nodded slowly. She gently bit her lip and smiled, then took Patriarch Huyan's rapidly fading nascent divinity and crushed it. A popping sound could be heard. Patriarch Huyan, a spirit-severing patriarch in his generation, had his nascent divinity crushed into tiny pieces. They transformed into dots of shining light that Xixiang then slowly absorbed in through her forehead. Xixiang's countenance became even more beautiful, enough to shock anyone who looked at her. "Thank you," she said, lifting a veil to cover her face and the features that would cause infatuation at first sight. Her eyes flickered with a bizarre light as she looked at Meng Hao. "Allow me to introduce myself. I'm Zhou Xixiang. The Zhai character is from the expression that which is noble and lofty. The Xiang character is from the expression a woman of ethereal color and celestial fragrance. I am Xixiang, holy daughter of the demon immortal sect. However, I prefer it when people call me demoness." With a smile, she gave a curtsied bow to Meng Hao. Her words were simple, as were her movements, yet an indescribable energy wafted from her, forming an incredible pressure that weighed on the entire area. "You owe me," said Meng Hao coolly, "and not just a simple favor." "Don't worry, fellow Taoist Meng. I acknowledge it as does the new demon immortal sect. We will never forget it." She cocked her head as she looked at him, then waved her hand, causing a jade slip to fly out. The jade slip was ancient and crude. On one side could be seen the character demon, and on the other side the character immortal. "This is the command medallion of a demon immortal sect elder. Whoever holds this medallion is a vassal elder. Fellow Taoist Meng, if you need assistance in the future, you may come to the demon immortal sect at any time." Meng Hao accepted the command medallion, looked it over, and then put it into his bag of holding. He nodded toward Xixiang, then, without another word, turned to leave. "I would like to thank you in a more personal way, fellow Taoist Meng," said Xixiang with a smile. "Therefore, I'll give you a bit of information. The pit located between the third and fourth peaks is critical to entering the fourth plane." Meng Hao stopped in place and turned to look back at her. Most likely, the other sects and clans have this information already. In fact, the fourth plane will never close. Anyone in the third plane who has the requisite skill can enter it. Without the skill, one can only gaze at the figurative ocean and lament one's inadequacy. Xixiang chuckled and bowed once more, then turned and disappeared. Meng Hao's eyes flickered. He sensed her power. She was completely different than before. As he looked at his bag of holding, he thought back to all his previous contact with Xixiang. He was 80% certain that his small assistance here would later yield help from Xixiang and the demon immortal sect, though it was impossible to predict its value. A relaxed smile appeared on his face. He had long since realized that in the cultivation world, one must rely on oneself. Help from outsiders was uncertain. Whether the demon immortal sect provided much or little didn't matter to him. His greatest acquisition in this affair was not the promise of Xixiang and the new demon immortal sect. Instead, it was his eighth nascent soul and his incredibly powerful fleshly body. Took a deep breath as he examined his body and the fearsome damage to his longevity in the eighth anima one. I've seen a lot of comments, questions, confusion about the issue of his longevity in the animas. Although the explanation wasn't extremely clear, It was implied that Meng Hao can restore any damage to his longevity using medicinal pills. As long as he doesn't run out of longevity within the 8th anima, any damage is inconsequential. Think of his longevity as a health bar, the total capacity of which slowly reduces over time, but can also be drained or refilled by various means. The total capacity might be reduced while he's in the 8th anima, but once he leaves it returns to normal, and any missing years of life can be made up for with medicinal pills. As for Meng Hao's current normal longevity, it doesn't really matter too much. He can freely duplicate longevity-increasing pills. That having been said, he still is confined by the limit of 1,000 years. It doesn't matter how many pills you take or what you do, you can't live past 1,000 without reaching spirit severing. As for the power of worldly expulsion that he had felt, he wasn't sure when, but it had vanished. That caused his eyes to glitter brightly as he looked over at the 4th peak. After a moment he looked away, and his body flickered as he left the 8th anima state and returned to the 1st anima. He took a step forward, collecting the soul whip before speeding off. It appeared to be meant as part of Patriarch Huyan's other whip, but he would not allow them to fuse. After he left this place, he would study both thoroughly. He wanted to find more good fortune in the 3rd plane. He whistled through the air as he passed the 7th peak and then the 6th peak. As he neared the 5th peak, his eyes glittered and he smiled. He sped directly toward it. Soon, the light of a restrictive spell appeared ahead. The spell had 3 layers, the outer dim, the middle flowing smoothly, the inner completely solid. It covered an area of about 300 meters. Beneath it stood a house, with a corpse leaning against its wall. Unlike the corpses outside, this one was not completely dried up but retained some lifelike qualities. It was an old man who had been gazing regretfully at the distance when he died. In his hand he held a bamboo flute, no magical item, just an ordinary, slightly shriveled one. Before the old man lay a drum about the size of a head. Completely violet-colored, it emanated a faint glow. A pulsating thrum echoed from it throughout the area. Outside the spell were 8 or so frowning cultivators from South Heaven, several attempting to break through it. Among them were 4 Jai clan members, including Xianxia and Liu Zichuan of the imperial bloodline clan, whom Meng Hao had frightened earlier. The others were from the eastern lands or northern reaches, all frowning as they looked at the violet drum. Their expressions showed desire. Meng Hao's arrival in a beam of multicolored light disturbed the quiet. The group immediately went on guard, but when they saw who it was, their faces darkened. His extortion in the 2nd plane had made them all gnash their teeth. Liu Zichuan immediately backed up, trembling. "You're all here, huh?" said Meng Hao, laughing as he approached. "I haven't seen you in days, but I missed you. I hope you've acquired lots of items here." His expression was sincere. He genuinely wanted everyone to profit. But the more he spoke this way, the darker their expressions became. They stared at him in displeasure. Some seemed to contemplate attacking and killing him to solve all their troubles at once. Meng Hao seemed not to notice. He smiled and sighed. "How come you're all ignoring me? Well, it doesn't matter. Fellow Taoists, I truly desire for you all to make great acquisitions here. That way I will benefit more." By now killing intent flickered in their eyes, and a few stepped forward, their tempers on the verge of erupting. Meng Hao still seemed not to notice. He had a bashful smile, even looking emotional, but to the others he was clearly showing off and courting death. Only Liu Zichuan's heart pounded nervously. This bastard is too brazen. He's grown powerful to spirit severing and yet shows only this level of power. Clearly he's provoking them into attacking. How shameless. Liu Zichuan remembered his own grievous situation. If these people attacked Meng Hao, they would quickly find themselves in the same miserable state. As he looked at Meng Hao's smile, it seemed more and more horrifying, yet he somehow looked forward to seeing these others meet the same fate he had. "Brothers," continued Meng Hao, "I know I displeased you in the 2nd plane. Please don't hold it to heart. Now that we're in the 3rd plane, I hope we can work together. Brothers, whether I find good fortune here depends on you." After finishing, Meng Hao clasped his hands and bowed appreciatively. The bow caused everyone, including Xianxia, to clench their teeth. Liu Zichuan's face twitched, but the others seemed on the verge of exploding. "Oh, there's also—" Meng Hao had straightened and was about to continue when one of the northern reaches cultivators couldn't hold back. His temper flared and he shot forward with a howl. "Shut up, bastard, so you admit you displeased us in the 2nd plane." Liu Zichuan's eyes widened with anticipation. "Take him out, kill him." The cultivator closed in, his face twisted viciously. His right hand rose to perform an incantation gesture, then pushed toward Meng Hao. At the same time, another northern reaches cultivator, and a Jai clan member shot forward, eyes flashing as they fell upon Meng Hao. A bashful look appeared on Meng Hao's face. This chapter was sponsored by Dead and Hermowin, Cameron Rowe Boyle, Lai Ho, and Daniel Young. Chapter 608, You Hurt Me. With a bashful expression, his right palm flew up and slapped the burly man across the face with incredible speed. A boom echoed. The burly man felt as if a mountain had collided with his head, his mind reeling. Originally, the blow should have sent him flying, but Meng Hao pulled his hand back at the last moment and grabbed the man's head, slamming it into the ground instead. The burly man shot up into the air and struck the ground with a rumbling crash. Bashful expression still on his face, Meng Hao lifted his right foot and began trampling the burly man. The burly man struggled furiously, his cultivation base exploding with power as he fought back. Yet Meng Hao's fearsome fleshly body made him scream miserably, shrieking as he shrank back down. Meng Hao grabbed the man's head and bashed it into the ground, causing blood to spray from the man's mouth. Ready to be reasonable, said Meng Hao angrily. He bashed the man's head into the ground again. I was congratulating you, and you want to kill me. Meng Hao slammed his head into the ground again. The burly man shrieked, trembling, shock covering his face as he was beaten senseless. That's wrong, said Meng Hao. That's immoral. He jumped up into the air and then began to stamp down onto the burly man, leaving footprints with each stamp of his foot. The burly man covered his head with both hands, screaming beneath Meng Hao's anger. You don't know what's good for you. I congratulate you and you repay my kindness with enmity. The scene of Meng Hao viciously trampling the man made Liu Zichuan's eyes gleam with excitement. His heart trembled with joy. It felt better to share misfortune with others than suffer alone. Most afraid were the other northern reaches cultivator and the Jai clan member who had also charged forward. Watching the scene play out made their scalps go numb. They were about to back up when Meng Hao looked at them with an expression of grief. Do people really hate me so much? He said. I was wishing you all well. If only this guy was ungrateful, it wouldn't matter, but you two don't appreciate my kindness either. He appeared torn by grief. The cultivators' scalps numbed further as they backed up, but Meng Hao lifted his right hand and made a grasping motion. You need to explain yourselves or you're not going anywhere. Meng Hao's grasping motion pulled them toward him. He slapped them with full strength, then rained blows down on them as they slammed into the ground. Why? Howled Meng Hao. He grabbed the Jai clan member and slammed him 7 or 8 times into the ground. The cultivator was furious, but regardless of his cultivation base or magical items, a few slaps from Meng Hao shattered everything. The Jai clan member panted with astonishment. Amid his astonishment, Meng Hao grabbed his head and slammed his face into the ground again. The other northern reaches cultivator shrieked, watching helplessly as the Jai clan member and his companion were like baby chicks in Meng Hao's hands, powerless to resist. Terror made him beg for mercy. But he couldn't escape. Every time Meng Hao leaped up, the three screamed miserably, blood spattering about. You hurt me and then smiled it off, cried Meng Hao. Unforgivable, I was sincere. The sight shook everyone watching. The other Jai clan members and northern reaches cultivators panted, shock on their faces. They rejoiced at their luck in not attacking, especially those who had nearly stepped forward. They felt they'd evaded disaster. Their eyes filled with unprecedented fear as they looked at Meng Hao. This fear was deeper than what they'd felt in the second plane. They had suddenly discovered they could be bullied here in the third plane too. Jai Xiaoxiao's eyes widened, panting with shock. As she stared at Meng Hao, he seemed like a madman. Fear coupled with the sensation. The Meng Hao from the second plane had extended himself perfectly into the third plane. Liu Zichuan stood in the group, his expression one of excitement. Inwardly he shouted, "Take him out, drop him dead." Face filled with grief and indignation, Meng Hao continued attacking. 2 other Jai clan members hesitated. An older man gritted his teeth and said, "Elder brother Meng, they were wrong, but it was their first offense." "Yeah," said one of the other northern reaches cultivators. "Elder brother Meng, if you keep beating them, they're going to die." It was just as the man said. The 3 offenders lay next to Meng Hao, soaked in blood, gasping as more breath came out than went in. Despite being cultivators, they had just been literally beaten to the verge of death. "Do you also wish to repay kindness with enmity?" asked Meng Hao, looking up at the Jai clan cultivator who had spoken first. The look made the old man tremble. He backed up quickly and cried, "These people went too far. I hate those who repay kindness with enmity. Elder brother Meng, continue, ignore me. The other northern reaches cultivator panicked as Meng Hao looked toward him. Elder brother Meng, get rid of the rascals. I'm pleased. I truly wish I could be more like you. Off to the side, Liu Zichuan's heart filled with disdain. He still felt himself to be far more powerful than these other people. The bashful look appeared again. His right foot was about to descend. Below, the Jai clan member covering his head suddenly felt good fortune arriving. Fellow Taoist Meng, my acquisitions, you can have 60%. His foot stopped. Meng Hao bent at the waist and patted the man's shoulder shyly. Good brother, he said, I have principles, how about 80%? Huh? The Jai clan member's face, covered in blood, showed shock. Before he could speak, a northern reaches cultivator shouted. 80%. Elder brother Meng, 80% of my acquisitions are yours. Meng Hao instantly shoved the Jai clan member back down and helped the northern reaches cultivator up. His face looked even more bashful and apologetic. I feel a bit guilty for such kindness, brother, said Meng Hao. Since you trust me, I wish you well. Acquire much here in the third plane. The cultivator wanted to cry but couldn't. He looked at Meng Hao and nodded vigorously. The Jai clan member who had just been shoved back down suddenly yelled out, 80%. I'll give 80% too. The other of the three also gritted his teeth and yelled out similarly. Meng Hao looked moved as he helped them all up. Fellow Taoists, I am truly indebted to your kindness, he said with an emotional sigh. I feel guilty, but since you all insist, fine, I accept. His eyes seemed to say that good people truly existed everywhere under heaven. The three stood unsteadily, looking at Meng Hao. Inwardly they cursed him but didn't dare show it. They were in complete dread of him. The others had only watched, but these three had experienced it. Every blow from Meng Hao contained no magical technique, only his fleshly body's power. He had used that alone to leave them no chance to resist. Stranger still, his fists and feet shattered their magical techniques. Such a fearsome fleshly body induced hopelessness. The bashful look on Meng Hao's face would haunt their nightmares. The three clasped their hands in respect and, supported by their groups, hobbled back to their position. Meng Hao glanced at Xianxia with a profound expression. Tremor ran through her. He had just reminded her of her promise to take him to Jai Mingfeng's corpse. Everything fell silent. Everyone stood quietly, having lost interest in the restrictive spell. All watched Meng Hao nervously. He looked at the spell for a while, then examined the house and the well-preserved corpse. Suddenly, he realized the corpse looked familiar. He was silent for a moment. The old man existed in his memory as a youth, a demon immortal sect disciple with 2 wings on his back, one of his second-plane friends. The name was Yixuanzi. After a moment of silence, Meng Hao clasped his hands and bowed deeply. Fellow Taoist Yixuanzi, he said, perhaps you don't recognize me, but we are friends in my memories. If your spirit remains, please open the restrictive spell. I would like to bury you so you can rest in peace. He wasn't thinking of magical items. He spoke truthfully. He wanted to bury his friend from the second plane so he could rest peacefully. After a long moment, Meng Hao rose. He didn't check the spell. Without a word, he turned to leave. But the restrictive spell suddenly glittered and shone behind him. Colors swirled as a rift appeared, opening soundlessly. It opened for Meng Hao. He trembled and looked back. Everyone watched, eyes wide, shock and disbelief overwhelming them. The restrictive spell is opening on its own. Meng Hao was right, a spirit in the underworld. If relationships from the second plane can open spells, we could use ours too. Everyone was shocked, scarcely believing what was happening. The matter exceeded their imagination and comprehension. It seemed simple yet deeply complex, a cycle of karma at work. The second plane was illusory, after all. Yet things that had occurred there and people met there had created resonance with reality. Bizarre indeed. In their shock and fear, Meng Hao looked back at the rift. After a moment, decisiveness appeared in his eyes. As everyone watched, panting, he strode toward the spell and entered. The rift twisted and rapidly closed. Meng Hao now stood inside the restrictive spell, fully separated from the outside world. Ignoring the shock outside, he looked at Yixuanzi's corpse, then silently approached it. He clasped his hands, bowed deeply, and began digging a hole next to the house. He carefully placed Yixuanzi's corpse into the deep hole. As for the flute and the drum, he did not take them for himself, but instead placed them in the pit next to the body. Yixuanzi, whether you recognize me or not, we are friends in my memories. Rest in peace. If there is reincarnation, I hope we meet again. He looked at the corpse, eyes filled with reminiscence. He remembered the second plane, his silkprince friends from the other peaks, and how they'd all been whipped together. After a long moment, he sighed softly. Just as he was about to fill the hole with dirt, the violet drum let out a thump, a heartbeat, clear and distinct. Meng Hao's brows furrowed. The violet drum, emanating a faint glow, slowly floated up out of the hole to hover before him. The drum was about the size of a head. Its head was black, sides violet. Faint magical symbols rose from the drum head, and a totem was visible on it. The totem showed a black toad with a vicious look, its long tongue wrapping a black dragon. The dragon struggled, powerless against the toad. Though just a totem, it seemed to move. On the other side was another totem, an enormous crocodile with ferocious scales, its mouth open in a soundless roar. The drum was extraordinary. Meng Hao was silent before reaching out. The drum flickered a few times, then slowly landed on his palm. As it touched him, a buzzing sound filled his mind, the call of a toad, the shriek of a black dragon, the coldness of the crocodile. When everything faded, Meng Hao knew how to use the drum. Outside, everyone's eyes widened with astonishment. Though envious and jealous, they hid it. The fearsomeness Meng Hao had displayed was now branded on their minds, an impression that could never be wiped away. Meng Hao put away the drum and looked at the corpse once more, clasping his hands in a bow. "Thank you for your help, fellow Taoist. I will not let anything unworthy happen to this." As he spoke, a warm wind blew through. His hair lifted and a murmuring voice seemed to echo. He buried the corpse and piled a grave mound, then waved his hand. A wooden plank flew over. He carved it with his finger, transforming it into a grave marker, and pushed it deep into the mound. "Here lies Xianxia. Safe journey, fellow Taoist," he said quietly. Then he turned and walked toward the restrictive spell. He had come only because of Xianxia and their memories, no other purpose. As Meng Hao neared, the rift appeared. After he walked out, it closed again. Everyone looked at him with odd expressions. They felt he was truly enigmatic. Ignoring them, Meng Hao continued walking. Suddenly he stopped and looked at Xianxia. Her heart trembled. She gritted her teeth, spoke quietly to the other Jai clan members, then shocked everyone by joining Meng Hao. He laughed as he flew up. She followed, and in a moment they disappeared in the distance. The others exchanged speechless glances. The impression Meng Hao left was deep and profound. Meng Hao flew ahead with Xianxia following. After disappearing from view, he looked back and smiled mysteriously. He remembered the river of stars before coming here when she'd been pressed against him. Goosebumps covered her. She quickly explained. Jai Mingfeng's host body was a conclave disciple from the first peak, but it's beneath the third peak. "Lead the way," Meng Hao replied coolly. He didn't care about Jai Mingfeng's corpse. He was binding Xianxia to him. He had inserted a mole into the Jai clan. If mishaps occurred, she couldn't escape unharmed. As a member, if she betrayed them, the consequences would be worse. Xianxia understood this perfectly. She had little room to maneuver. Originally, her second plane actions were temporary. She could adjust in the third plane. But discovering Meng Hao's fearsome power, she realized she had no way to fight back. So she wouldn't struggle. They sped together, Xianxia compliant, Meng Hao using divine sense to avoid others. Soon they neared the third peak. Xianxia noticed they didn't encounter anyone, assuming it was Meng Hao's doing. The realization filled her with dread. Meng Hao's brow furrowed. He had sensed 6 or 7 others, all alone, all moving in the same direction, toward the pit between the third and fourth peaks. He remembered Jixiang's words about the true spirit night and the pit between the peaks. That pit led to the fourth plane. His eyes glittered, and a cold smile appeared. Since they weren't seeking more fortune in the third plane but rushing to the fourth realm, they must have acquired plenty already. Time to make them live up to their agreement. Ahead, Xianxia stopped. "We're here, there are restrictive spells, follow me." Meng Hao flicked his finger. A red medicinal pill flew to her, her face flickered. She had time to dodge, but the cold streak in Meng Hao's eyes made her freeze. She let it enter her mouth. As it dissolved, acrid liquid spread through her body. "Let's go," said Meng Hao with a smile. He looked around at the ruins and flickering spells. Xianxia's face was unsightly. She turned and proceeded forward, her curves stirring souls. She followed a specific route for about an incense stick's burn time. Soon, a well appeared ahead. 2 corpses lay at its bottom. One was Jai Mingfeng, the other the host body. A 3-eyed crow perched atop Jai Mingfeng. As Meng Hao looked down, the crow turned to look at him. Jai Mingfeng had 2 bags of holding, one white, one black. As Meng Hao looked at the black bag, Jai Xiaoxiao spoke. The black bag holds Jai Mingfeng's demon beasts. The three-eyed crow gained sentience long ago. When he was 3 years old, it flew in from outside and accompanied him ever since. You got lucky killing him. In the outside world, even at spirit-severing stage, it would be very difficult. He's the nascent soul stage Dao child of the Jai clan. He had a patriarch's brand, though it faded when he died. Meng Hao's eyes glittered. The crow flew up, transforming into a black beam that shot toward him. Before he could react, an excited voice came from the copper mirror in his bag. Bitches, Lord Fifth is awake, little bitches. Hey, I see a lovely three-eyed concubine here. This chapter was sponsored by Jansen and Harvey Joe. Chapter 610, Injured Lord Fifth. The three-eyed crow knew the parrot. It flew out overbearingly, but hearing the parrot's voice, it shook, feathers standing on end. Something had gotten it worked up. It shrieked miserably, then turned around in midair and fled. At the same time, the parrot flew out from Meng Hao's bag of holding, in high spirits and arrogant as ever. Its eyes glittered with excitement as it raised its head and squawked a few times, then shot forward toward the crow. Long time no see, what are you running away for? If you keep running, Lord Fifth is going to screw you. Beloved concubine, don't run away, it cried. Husband and wife for a day means mutual benefactors forever. We couldn't remain that way, but don't flee. I think of you and wallow in my memories. The parrot was about to overtake the crow when tears appeared in its eyes. It seemed ready to die rather than be violated. Using an unknown magical technique, all its black feathers suddenly fell off. In an instant there was no black crow, only a flesh-colored, bald bird. The sight was appalling. But the miserable shriek came not from the crow but the parrot, a blood-curdling scream of deep pain. It stopped in midair, staring at the falling feathers, then cried out. Why did you do that? It couldn't accept it. 1 moment before, the crow had been its true love, perfectly aligned with its sense of beauty. The next, everything was inverted. Its entire body shook. What had happened was too intensely upsetting. Taking advantage of the parrot's sudden despair, the crow used an unknown method to disappear. It vanished without a trace. The parrot seemed on the verge of madness. It raised its head to the sky and roared. Damnation, Lord Fifth will not let you off the hook. Meng Hao felt sympathy for it, especially seeing how it had changed its words. Clearly, the parrot was deeply upset. A face appeared on the bell attached to the parrot's foot. The meat jelly's voice, wickedly amused. Happy, according to Lord Third, that crow is honest and sincere. What if it had used that move while you were screwing it? Meng Hao stared blankly. The parrot trembled before intense alarm appeared on its face. Meng Hao had long since gotten used to the meat jelly and parrot's antics. He had wondered why they hadn't appeared in the first or second planes, assuming something about the demon immortal sect prevented them. The parrot's voice suggested it had just woken up, but he couldn't make the mastiff appear either. Remembering Patriarch Huyan's words, he realized their origin was unfathomable. For Jai Xiaoxiao, this was her first time seeing the parrot. Her eyes widened, especially hearing the meat jelly. Though brazen, she was still a young woman and flushed, making a reprimanding pay sound. The instant she made that sound, the parrot stared at her. A deadly gleam appeared in its eyes, wanting to vent its frustration on her. Panting, it looked her over. No fur or feathers, damn it. Absolutely no fur or feathers. Dear heavens, why do you punish me this way? The parrot howled and then clenched its jaw. Even the mere thought of the crow shedding its feathers caused it to feel profound pain. Although Jai Xiaoxiao didn't have the fur or feathers that the parrot liked, as far as she was concerned, the damnable thing's gaze was far too penetrating. Meng Hao ignored the parrot. His right hand made a grasping motion, pulling Jai Mingfeng's 2 bags of holding from the well into his hands. He glanced them over but didn't open them, putting them away instead. Then, eyes glittering, he snatched the wailing parrot and shoved it back into his bag of holding. He looked at Jai Xiaoxiao. I'm going to collect treasures, he said. If you're free, come with me. I'm headed to the 4th plane entrance. Jai Xiaoxiao hesitated, then nodded. She didn't seem surprised about the 4th plane, as if she'd known all along. Meng Hao gazed at her, thinking about her clan's resources. The 4th plane information wasn't hard to come by. They left, Meng Hao taking the lead toward the pit between the 3rd and 4th peaks. It wasn't far. About 2 hours later they arrived. There were quite a few people already gathered together. There were a handful from the Jai clan, one of whom was Jai Mingkong, who looked at Meng Hao with a strange glow in his eyes. Li Shiki and Han Bei sat cross-legged not too far off, as did Wang Lihai. As soon as Meng Hao neared, their expressions flickered. Meng Hao was all smiles, as he waved to everyone in greeting. Ha ha ha, what a small world, huh? We meet again, fellow Taoists. So tell me, how did things go for you in the third plane? What did you acquire? Behind him, Jai Xiaoxiao's cheek twitched a little as she realized that Meng Hao was about to con some more people. Meng Hao offers his most sincere well wishes to all of you fellow Taoists, he continued. I hope that you can really profit well in the third plane. That way, I can also bask a bit in your glory, right? Thank you, fellow Taoists. You are all truly good people. Meng Hao seemed a bit emotional and even somewhat embarrassed. A bashful expression appeared as he looked over the increasingly grim-faced crowd, then clasped hands and bowed. As for the group from the southern domain, their eyes flickered. That was especially true of Han Bei. When she saw Meng Hao's smile, a tremor ran through her body and she quickly lowered her head. She knew all too well what Meng Hao's smile meant. It must be stated that it was quite well known in the southern domain that Meng Hao had conned many people with that bashful grin. Although Wang Lihai had never seen Meng Hao's bashful side, he had heard of his conman's personality. When he saw the smile and Han Bei's reaction, he instantly went on guard. Li Shiki put on a forced smile. She looked at Meng Hao but didn't say anything. Songjia was also there. She looked at Meng Hao with a complex expression. It didn't matter how Meng Hao smiled to her, it was all the same. As for the Dao child from the Li clan, Li Tiandao, he was the only southern domain cultivator who didn't notice anything special about Meng Hao's smile. He frowned, and killing intent suddenly sprang up in his eyes. In contrast, the members of the Jai clan seemed to have received news about what happened earlier. Although all of them wore completely ordinary expressions, deep in their eyes, vigilance could be seen. Meng Hao looked around at everyone, then suddenly seemed a bit discouraged. He was just thinking that it seemed his extortion attempt had failed when he noticed the look in the eye of the Li clan Dao child, Li Tiandao. Suddenly, he seemed a bit livened. Fellow Taoist, he said, I don't think I recognize you. He quickly walked toward Li Tiandao, a smile on his face. Tell me, did you acquire much in the third plane? Come, open your bag of holding so that brother can select his share. Screw off, said Li Tiandao coldly. A moment ago, Meng Hao had worn a sincere smile and a bashful expression. A moment later, his face completely changed. The instant Li Tiandao spoke, a ruthless expression appeared on Meng Hao's face. His right palm instantly shot out toward Li Tiandao. A cold light of derision flickered in Li Tiandao's eyes. His cultivation base was extraordinary. If you looked at the southern domain as a whole, it didn't matter if you were talking about members of his current generation, or even Li Dei who had already passed away. Li Tiandao's cultivation base was extraordinary. He gave a cold snort and then made a grasping motion with his right hand. Instantly, a blade of white light appeared in his hand. However, before he could even unleash the power of the blade, Meng Hao's palm, moving with indescribable speed, slapped onto his face, letting out a huge bang. One slap sent Li Tiandao completely senseless. He was furious and wanted to struggle back. However, his fate was the same as the cultivator earlier from the northern reaches. Meng Hao directly slammed him down onto the ground. Punches and kicks rained down onto him, the sound of which echoed out in every direction. Li Tiandao let out miserable shrieks. He tried to fight back, and even tried to wield his blade against Meng Hao. However, all it took was a slap from Meng Hao to cause the heavenly blade to shatter into pieces. The sudden violence caused the eyes of all the spectators to grow wide. You actually dare to cuss at me, cried Meng Hao, emphasizing his words with kicks. I was sincerely wishing you well and you respond with curses. Ridiculous. His expression grew more vicious and intense, causing all the onlookers to grow increasingly shaky with fear. Li Tiandao was livid, but gradually that lividity was replaced by terror. Soon, it turned into despair. Blood spouted from his mouth as the shadow of death loomed over him. Finally, Han Bei blinked, cleared her throat and offered up a quick reminder. That finally provoked a reaction from Li Tiandao who, despite feeling wronged to the extreme, shouted out that he would pay a higher price. After the matter was resolved, Meng Hao once again smiled sincerely, and then took 2 of the total of 3 magical items that Li Tiandao had acquired. Furthermore, those 2 items were the very best of all of them. Even as Li Tiandao felt pain in his heart, Meng Hao clasped his shoulder, then sighed and bashfully expressed his deep thanks. After that, Meng Hao looked around at everyone else. Considering what had just happened to Li Tiandao, everyone else had no choice but to suppress their curses inwardly, open their bags of holding and produce the items that they had acquired. With their oaths in place, there was no way to go back on their words, and no way to hide things in violation of the agreement. Despite their pain, they could only watch on in fear as Meng Hao carefully selected one incredible magic item after another. Wow, this looks amazing. It's actually a scale shield. Excellent, excellent. This flower vase is incredible. With one glance you can tell it's a precious treasure. Ooh, look at this clay figure. It's missing an arm and a head, but I'll just have to suck it up and take it. Yep. Meng Hao circled around, making acquisitions that would cause anyone to be shocked. Every person from whom he took treasures had faces filled with unsightly looks. If it weren't for the fact that none of them felt capable of taking him on, they would surely attempt to attack him. The hatred they felt rose up to the heavens, and their hearts dripped with blood. To them, Meng Hao wasn't just taking away magical items, but their most prized possessions. Eventually, he came to stand in front of Xianxia. He looked at the jade pendant she held out, as well as the complicated, cold look in her eyes. He stood there thoughtfully for a moment, then took out one of the magical items he had acquired and put it in her hand. Xianxia frowned and was about to say something when, all of a sudden, 3 prismatic beams of light whistled through the air toward them from off in the distance. The person in the lead position was none other than Fang Yu. Behind her were the 2 other men from the Fang clan. The 2 men wore excited expressions. Clearly, whatever objects they had just acquired left them very happy. This chapter was sponsored by Suadikani, James Kredsai, Sabaki, and Andy L. Chapter 611, Fellow Taoists, allow me to say something. Meng Hao's eyes gleamed and he turned. With a smile, he clasped hands and bowed to the 3 incoming members of the Fang clan. Ah, the 3 fellow Taoists from the Fang clan. These 2 brothers can't hide the joy on their faces. You must have acquired quite a bit. Fang Yu's face was a bit unsightly as she stared angrily at Meng Hao. The way he looked right now caused her fury to flare up. No, we did, she said, glaring at him. Oh, that's not good, replied Meng Hao with a wink. It doesn't even count as not good, said Fang Yu, clenching her teeth, an uncompromising expression appearing on her face. Look at you, you acquired all kinds of things, but Big Sis put everything on the line and only got 2 items. You still want to take advantage of me. Okay, how about this? Said Meng Hao, looking a bit embarrassed. However, before he could finish speaking, one of the 2 men from the Fang clan who stood behind Fang Yu suddenly let out a cold laugh. We try to give you face, but you insist on acting shamelessly, huh? You think this is still the 2nd plane? Screw off post-haste, you little bastard. Otherwise, you won't be leaving the 3rd plane alive. The other Fang clan member stepped forward, an expression of scorn and disdain on his face as he said, You really don't know your own limitations. Don't you know that even the Jade clan would think twice before trying to steal away the things acquired here by the Fang clan? As for you, well, take out half of everything on your person and hand it over. Otherwise. As the 2 men spoke, Meng Hao's gaze came to be fixed upon them. However, before he could even get angry, Fang Yu's face filled with fury. She spun to face the 2 fellow clan members. You want him to screw off, she said. Clenching her teeth, she vanished to reappear directly next to one of the Fang clan members. Suddenly, her fist descended. Before the Fang clan member could even say anything, a boom could be heard, and he tumbled backward, blood spraying from his mouth as he looked at Fang Yu in astonishment. Fang Yu, what are you doing? Shameless, you say, she cried, fires of rage burning in her eyes. As of this moment, she truly looked like an explosive dragon. Her body flickered as she neared the man again. He was shaking and was about to fight back when another boom echoed out and he was sent flying. You dare to threaten him. You say he won't leave the 3rd plane alive. Well then, I'll make sure you don't leave the 3rd plane alive. Killing intent flickered in Fang Yu's eyes. Before the Fang clan member even landed on the ground, she once again vanished to reappear directly next to him. Her fist smashed out again. This was no perfunctory blow, but rather contained all of her explosive power. A boom could be heard that rattled heaven and earth. Everyone watched on in shock as the blood sprayed from the mouth of the Fang clan member, and then his entire body exploded into bloody pieces. His nascent soul emerged, fleeing and screaming at the same time. Fang Yu, you dare to slaughter a fellow clan member. You're dead. You actually dare to kill me over an outsider. So what if I kill you? Said Fang Yu with a cold snort. She performed an incantation gesture, then waved her right hand. Instantly, an enormous square cauldron magically appeared. It instantly shot toward the fleeing nascent soul of the Fang clan cultivator. When they slammed together, a miserable shriek could be heard and the nascent soul shattered. At the same time, the man's bag of holding flew out to be snatched by Fang Yu. She quickly erased the brand mark on it and then tossed it over to Meng Hao. The scene which had just played out in front of everyone left them completely shaken. That was especially true of the Jai clan, whose eyes were wide and filled with disbelief. Killing a fellow clan member was a high crime in any clan. They truly couldn't understand why Fang Yu would respond so viciously to the handful of words that had just been spoken. Fang Yu turned and looked at the other Fang clan member. The man trembled and took a few steps back. His heart pounded with nervousness and vigilance as he quickly said, "Elder sister Fang Yu, this was all just a misunderstanding. You said he doesn't know his own limitations," she said, her eyes flickering with killing intent. The Fang clan cultivator's scalp was numb as he fell back nervously. Before he could get more than a few steps, Fang Yu was upon him, and her fist descended. A boom could be heard. Blood sprayed from the man's mouth as he fell back. "Elder sister Fang Yu, I was in the wrong. Really, it was my mistake." "Didn't you tell him to take out half of his belongings and hand them over?" she said coldly. She performed an incantation with her right hand, causing the illusory square cauldron to fly toward the man. Under the incredible pressure, the Fang clan cultivator's face fell. Even as he shot backward, he pulled out his bag of holding and threw it to Meng Hao. "Elder brother Meng, allow me to atone for my crime. Junior brother admits his mistake." Meng Hao grabbed the bag of holding with a frown. It was impossible to tell exactly what he was thinking. "You're clever," said Fang Yu. "Therefore you can avoid the death penalty, but that doesn't mean you're exempt from punishment." She glared at the Fang clan cultivator as the square cauldron descended. A boom could be heard as blood poured from the man's mouth. He staggered backward, his face pale. Although he didn't fear for his life now, he was still scared witless. He immediately clasped hands and bowed to Fang Yu. Meng Hao gathered up the 2 bags of holding, then looked over at Fang Yu. She looked back at him. "What was that for?" he asked. "None of your concern," replied Fang Yu. With a frown, she gritted her teeth and continued, "In any case, my things are mine and I'm not going to give them to you. There's no use in even thinking about it. It's not gonna happen." Meng Hao looked at her deeply for a moment, but didn't speak again about the matter. Everyone around were lost in various thoughts and didn't speak. It was in this moment that the deep pit they stood next to suddenly emitted a shocking rumbling sound. It almost sounded as if something deep inside was roaring. The ground shook, and the countless vine-like objects that surrounded the area began to twitch and writhe in bizarre fashion. The vines grew thicker and longer as they surrounded the area, looking almost like snakes. The demonic chi from the surrounding area surged in toward the pit, transforming into an enormous pillar of light that towered up into the sky. As of this moment, the enormous pillar of light was visible from any position within the first heaven of the demon immortal sect. It was like a summons that echoed out in the hearts and minds of all the South Heaven cultivators. A message resounded out to everyone. It clearly told them that the way to the 4th plane was now open. The possibility now existed to enter the 4th plane. Meng Hao's mind trembled and the cultivators around him began to pant. Their eyes flickered, and yet no one wanted to be the first one to make an attempt. Everyone stood watching, not willing to act rashly. Time passed, and more people began to arrive, attracted by the column of light. Of course, not a one could evade Meng Hao's extortion. Eventually Su Qing arrived, which meant that the area was now filled with the majority of the cultivators who were here in the 3rd plane. Their gazes flickered as they looked thoughtfully around at each other. The first person to make a move was an unimposing, emaciated old man from the southern domain. He flew out to stand on one of the vines. After grasping a hold of it, he looked back at the crowd of onlookers and then smiled. Then he produced a magical item, a fan, which he pushed up against the surface of the vine. Instantly, a green glow surrounded the fan and it began to disintegrate. It transformed into dots of scintillating light, which then were absorbed into the vine. At the same time, the vine began to grow longer. It extended down into the pit, taking the old man with it. Fang Yu looked over at Meng Hao and then spoke, her words directed not just at him, but at everyone around. According to the Fang clan's understanding, one needs magical items to be able to enter the 4th plane. Magical items from the outside world aren't quite as effective as items acquired in the demon immortal sect. Offer them as sacrifices to the demon vines, and depending on their value, the vines will extend down. If you leave the vine and try to descend on your own, you will die without a doubt. With that, Fang Yu's body flashed, and she neared a vine. In much the same way as the old man moments before, she produced a magical item which she pushed up against the vine. The vine began to grow, extending down into the pit. One by one, more people began to fly forward. The Jai clan members, the northern reaches cultivators, the group from the southern domain. One after another, they stepped onto the vines, produced treasures, and then sank down into the pit. As all of this happened, Meng Hao cleared his throat. Looking embarrassed and a bit bashful, he began to speak. Fellow Taoists, allow me to say something. Considering that you need to offer continual sacrifices to the vines, I must say that I actually have quite a few magical items. However, if I loan them out, if you take one, you'll have to repay me with two. I'm honest with all customers. It's a reasonable price. Now, who's to say what incredible acquisitions you will make in the fourth plane? He continued. Therefore, before going in, you should really think about this. Buy one, repay with two is definitely reasonable. As soon as the others heard him, grim expressions could be seen on their faces. Buy one, repay with two is reasonable. I've never seen extortion of this level. What a joke! Even if I have to give up halfway to the fourth plane, I swear I will never again get entangled with this black-hearted Meng. Glaring hatefully at Meng Hao, they completely ignored his offer and quickly grabbed onto the vines and then sank down into the pit. Su Qing stood next to Meng Hao, covering her smile with a hand. She remembered all of the things Meng Hao had done back in the Reliance sect, and as she looked at him now, her smile only grew sweeter. They're going to be sorry, said Meng Hao, clearing his throat a few times. I really did have good intentions just now. He looked blinking at Su Qing and her smile grew wider. Shaking her head, she flew over to grab a vine, then sank down into the pit. Meng Hao wasn't the last person on the outside. Some of the people chose not to attempt to enter the fourth plane. Some decided to just give up where they were. Seeing that no one else was going to enter the pit, Meng Hao walked around the edge of it, eventually decided on a position somewhat in the center. He reached out to grab a vine, then produced a magical item which he slowly pushed onto its surface. As it absorbed the item, the vine began to grow, taking him down at high speed into the pitch black of the pit. As soon as he entered the pit, Meng Hao could sense coldness coming from all around him. At the same time, he saw that it was not completely pitch black. Glittering dots of glowing light could be seen in the walls, making everything in the area visible. Around Meng Hao could be seen dozens of vines sinking downward. Upon each, one was a South Heaven cultivator. Far down below was completely pitch black, and it was impossible to see. Occasionally, a roaring sound could be heard, shooting up from down below like a wild wind. When that happened, everyone held tightly to their vines to stabilize their shaking bodies. Chapter 612, The Gentleman Loves Money. A wind blew, as cold as the underworld. As it passed by, everyone's hearts grew as cold as if they were stuck in the middle of winter. Even more shocking was that the frigid wind made the cultivators almost like mortals. Everyone began to tremble as they clung to their vines. Their breath turned into ice, which then cracked and shattered, causing everyone to feel extremely astonished. Were it not for the vines, and the warmth which pulsed out from within them into the bodies of everyone present, then they wouldn't be able to proceed downward for very long, not even if they had higher cultivation bases. Meng Hao's eyes flickered as he clutched the vine. He had long since come to the conclusion that these vines were a critical element in being able to reach the fourth plane. Many others had come to the same conclusion. Although not everyone had chosen to attempt to enter the fourth plane, everyone who had come to the primordial demon immortal plane were outstanding figures from the lands of South Heaven. As for those who did choose to enter the fourth plane, they definitely wouldn't just give up halfway. As they produced more and more treasures to sacrifice to the vines twisted and writhed, extending downward at high speed. Time passed by slowly. Meng Hao was the last in line. As he descended, he glanced around to inspect the area. As far as he could tell, the pit seemed bottomless. It was impossible to tell how far they had gone down, and yet they still couldn't see any end in sight. The frigid wind grew more intense, seemingly increasing the number of treasures required by the vines. Not too far off from Meng Hao was Li Tiandao. His face was gradually filling with apprehension. Although he had come prepared with a good supply of magical items, he was finding it difficult to keep up with how much needed to be sacrificed. By this point, it didn't seem to matter the quality of the magical items being sacrificed. Almost anything would do. Even still, the miscellaneous collection of magical items in Li Tiandao's bag of holding were not very plentiful. If things kept going with no bottom in sight, then he would soon have to begin sacrificing important magical items. To him, it was something impossible to accept. He frowned and gritted his teeth, a look of determination gleaming in his eyes. He suddenly stopped, apparently preparing himself to start climbing back up. It seemed he planned to give up on his attempt to enter the fourth plane. However, almost as soon as he began to climb up, before he had even gone more than a meter or so, his face flickered. The frigid wind around him suddenly grew 10 times as powerful. His hair and his eyebrows became snow white in the blink of an eye. Ice crystals even formed on his skin. Clearly, he was on the verge of being transformed into an ice statue. The intense sense of grave crisis he felt caused Li Tiandao to immediately pull out one of his important magical treasures. It was a glowing blue sword that somewhat resembled a saber. A single glance was enough to tell that this was anything but an ordinary treasure. Forcing down the pain he felt, Li Tiandao placed the sword onto the vine, whereupon it sank down inside. The coldness around Li Tiandao vanished and his body slowly returned to normal. However, his expression was one of astonishment. "We're only allowed to go down, not up," he grumbled inwardly. "Or is it that going back up requires an even higher price?" Everyone around was aware of the strange event which had just occurred and were shocked. They all began to think various thoughts. It was at this point that Li Tiandao saw that his own vine was no longer moving down, but retracting back upward. This provoked a reaction from the others. "That can't be right. It's not that you can't go up. Once you enter this place, even if you want to quit, you still have to sacrifice treasures." That must be the situation. It seems getting into the fourth plane isn't so easy after all. Meng Hao had the best view of the situation. His eyes flickered thoughtfully, and he rubbed his bag of holding. Suddenly, a bashful smile appeared on his face. He said nothing, but simply allowed his vine to slowly continue on downward. Li Tiandao hesitated thoughtfully for a moment. Right now, he had two options to pick from: go up or go down. Either way, he would have to spend all of his magical items. After a moment of hesitation, Li Tiandao clenched his jaw. "Since I have to waste the magical items, I might as well risk it all," he thought. "If I don't, then everything I already spent will have been a complete waste. However, if I succeed, I can make up for everything with gains in the fourth plane." Many of the other cultivators were thinking the same thing as Li Tiandao. They clenched their jaws, eyes shining with determination. To them it was a gamble. However, if they gave up now, then they would definitely end up with nothing. By holding on for a bit longer, they would at least have a chance to make up for what they had already spent. Since that was the case, there was no reason not to gamble. Time passed. A day later, the group was deep into the pit. However, they still couldn't see the bottom. It really seemed as if there was no end at all. By this point, quite a few of their number had already used up their supply of random magical items. If they wanted to continue, then they would either have to use up the magical items they had discovered in the demon immortal sect, or draw on their own store of important personal magical items. The dilemma they faced caused the faces of quite a few of the cultivators to look extremely unsightly. Before stepping foot into this place, all of them had believed themselves to be extremely well equipped with magical items. Now, though, they realized that they simply didn't have enough. Compared to them, Meng Hao really did have it very easy. He had vast amounts of magical items in his bag of holding. He casually produced treasures to sacrifice to the vines. Not only did they continue to move downward, Meng Hao actually caused his vine to change course occasionally to hand over magical items to Su Qing. This caused the eyes of everyone else present to burn with anger and extreme jealousy. "I just have too many treasures," said Meng Hao with a sigh. The sound of his voice echoed around, causing everyone's gums to itch with hatred. "Fellow Taoists," he then announced, "if any of you are running low on treasures, all you have to do is speak up. We're all in this together, through thick and thin. No matter what happens, I won't ignore your plight while I am in a good position. If you need to borrow some magical items, I'll lend them to you without hesitation. Don't worry, my prices are reasonable and I'm honest with all customers. Buy one, pay back 3. His voice echoed about loudly within in the pit. Everyone could hear, even the old man in the lead position. Their faces immediately twisted. Fang Yu looked back with glaring eyes, and yet a smile could be seen on her face. As for the Jai clan members, their faces were unsightly. If they had such reactions, then there was no need to mention everyone else. When the crowds heard Meng Hao, their hearts filled with both hatred and helplessness. "You crafty, shameless villain," someone said. "Even if our magical items run even lower than now, there's no way we'll ask for your help." "That's right," said someone else. "Outside it was buy one, pay back 2, now it's buy one, pay back 3. Raising prices like that is despicable to the extreme. I'll die before asking for your help." Meng Hao heard the furious reactions and simply sighed. "You're all wrong," he said. "Each and every one of these magical items represents an important memory to me. I'm offering to lend you, not my magical items, but rather the true love of my life." He let out another emotional sigh. "In all honesty," he continued, "my intentions truly are good. Look at these magical items of mine. Their glow is so resplendent and entrancing. These are high-quality products. Think about it, all of you. With some of my magical items, you can get into the fourth plane without a hitch. Once you're there, you can acquire things so valuable that you can pay back what you owe me in the blink of an eye. It's completely worth it. Brothers and sisters, you have to look at things objectively. The price you will be paying now is nothing. The most important thing is to look at what you have to gain. Without paying a price, how can you gain anything, am I right?" Meng Hao was using all his skills to try to persuade everyone. These, of course, were the same skills he had used in his shop back in the Reliance sect. However, those who heard only continued to get more angry. Su Qing was off to the side, covering her smile with a hand. The gaze with which she looked at Meng Hao continued to grow warmer and warmer. "Fellow Taoists, how can this tiny price possibly compare to the chance to step into the fourth plane?" Meng Hao's final sentence was full of meaning. His words echoed about, filled with an air of good faith. Many of the various cultivators were actually moved inwardly, and they suddenly felt conflicted. Li Tiandao gritted his teeth. He currently only had 4 magical items left, and to sacrifice any of them would cause him incredible pain. His expression filled with determination, and he said, "I'll take 3. Hearing this, Meng Hao's expression shook visibly. He immediately pulled out a magical item and placed onto the surface of his own vine, causing it to change directions and head toward Li Tiandao. "Elder brother Li, you are truly experienced and knowledgeable, talented and bold. All right, listen. This is my first transaction of the day, so I'll give you a bit of a discount. I'll give you these 3 magical items, and you only need to pay me back with 8. These 3 magical items have a value of 30,000 spirit stones. In that case, you need to pay me back 80,000 spirit stones." With that, he produced 3 ordinary-looking random magical items, as well as a promissory note. Then he used the same method he had used in the second plane, the Tao Oath. Li Tiandao gritted his teeth. After completing the formalities, he took the 3 treasures and then pressed one onto the surface of the vine. Instantly, it descended downward at rapid speed, alleviating his anxiety for the moment. "Did you see that, everyone?" said Meng Hao, setting his head nobly. "Meng Hao is a gentleman. The gentleman loves money and earns it righteously. I'm not forcing anybody and am even willing to sell things on credit. That's right, you don't need to pay me back now. A simple promissory note can solve all your problems. You can simply pay me back after we leave this place. What a great deal." Everyone around couldn't help but think that Meng Hao truly had reached the pinnacle of shamelessness. More time passed, over half a day. There was still no bottom in sight. By this time, Li Tiandao owed Meng Hao more than 400,000. It was at that point that Wang Lihai couldn't hold back from calling out. "Give me 10. "I'll take 10 too," said Li Shiki, gritting her beautiful teeth. "10 for me too," said Han Bei with a sigh. Meng Hao immediately looked quite enlivened. He adroitly produced the magical items and promissory note, watched as the 3 swore their Tao oath, then smilingly handed over the magical items. "When you purchase from me, you can rest your heart at ease. The quality of all products is guaranteed, and I deliver everything directly to you." The 3 collected up the magical items they had purchased and then completely ignored Meng Hao. They began to feed the items into the vines and descend down further. Another day passed. Soon more people began to run out of treasures. Either that, or they weren't willing to sacrifice the treasures they still possessed. No matter how much they hated Meng Hao, they had no choice but to call out to him. "Buy 1, pay back 5. Fellow Taoists, I'm starting to run low on magical items, so I have no choice but to raise the price. Furthermore, I have to announce that when I am down to only 10 magical items, then I will have no other choice than to begin an unprecedented, never before seen in history, never again to be repeated auction." Although Meng Hao sighed, his eyes actually shone with a brilliant light. As soon as the words left his mouth, it gave rise to furious complaints. Despite the anger, people gritted their teeth and spent the price of 1 to 5 to acquire large amounts of magical items. "What a profit," thought Meng Hao. "Ha ha ha, I never thought that the ancient demon immortal sect would turn out to be my blessed land." He hung onto his vine, clutching a thick stack of promissory notes. When he looked at the numbers written on them, his eyes glowed brightly. His addiction to making money existed deep in his bones and had not been reduced in the slightest, regardless of his advances in cultivation base. I'm rich. This chapter was sponsored by Kairag Patel, Extreme GTP, Gerald Tisnado, and Hikaritanju. Chapter 613, Fourth Plane. Hopefully this pit goes even deeper, thought Meng Hao, his eyes shining. The best would be if we keep going for about 9 or 10 days. His bag of holding didn't have much else in it other than the vast, random assortment of magical items. Many of them were things completely useless as far as Meng Hao was concerned. There were even treasures he had acquired when he was in the qi condensation stage, but hadn't discarded even down to this day. He had kept them because he just couldn't bear to part with them. Back in those days, when he was young, he had been completely impoverished, unwilling to even part with a single spirit stone. These magical items were each worth dozens of spirit stones, so how could he possibly have simply discarded them? He had always been searching for a way to dispose of them. However, the Black Lands and the Western Desert were both poor and barren places. Therefore, such items had accumulated there within his bag of holding. If an outsider could glimpse the inside of his bag of holding, they would be completely shocked. The inside was completely chaotic, filled with anything and everything. After all, these were all of Meng Hao's belongings. Every time he ran out of spirit stones, he could still look inside the bag of holding and feel a little bit of contentment. The opportunity he had now was something completely rare and had him thoroughly excited. One cultivator after another gritted their teeth and then called out to purchase magical items, and Meng Hao rushed to peddle them. Meng Hao wasn't worried that they would refuse to acknowledge their promissory notes. These people were all Dao children and chosen of great clans and sects. They didn't lack spirit stones, plus, there was a Dao oath in place. They wouldn't dare to not pay him back. Next to Meng Hao was one of the Northern Reaches cultivators. His eyes were bright red as he glared at Meng Hao, clutching a small, glittering sword in his hand. His voice filled with madness, he cried, "Damn it, Meng Hao, this is a qi condensation magical item. You actually charged me 10,000 spirit stones for this. I wouldn't pay 10 spirit stones for this thing. You're such a swindler." "Yeah, look at this. This is a magical item for a foundation establishment cultivator. You charged me 20,000 spirit stones, and I have to pay back 100,000. Look at this fan. What the hell, it's broken. It might be a core formation magical item, but you charged me 50,000 for this piece of crap. Why don't you just outright rob me?" In response to the ire of the crowd, Meng Hao blinked. "These things might be trash to you people," he said coldly, "but I worked hard to collect them. I often went without food and water just to collect together these possessions. If you don't want them, then you can return them. Then you'll go onto my list of unwelcome customers." The others were fuming with anger, but they could only gnash their teeth and eventually let out long sighs. Then they angrily shoved the magical items onto the surface of the vines, causing them to sink down further. Eventually, even the Jai clan members began to call out to Meng Hao. Soon, there were few within the crowd that didn't owe Meng Hao huge amounts of spirit stones. As everyone proceeded on, they looked at Meng Hao with eyes that desired to cry but contained no tears. They proceeded on impatiently for another day. Eventually, far down below, they caught sight of a glow of light. Finally, they glimpsed the bottom of the pit. In that instant, those who owed Meng Hao vast quantities of spirit stones began to weep with excitement. Meng Hao was the only one who let out sighs of regret. "How can this pit be so shallow?" he mused with a frown. "If only it were a bit deeper. I never got to start my auction." He watched as everyone around him excitedly followed along with the vines as they continued on toward the bottom. It didn't take very long for them to reach the end of the pit. The bottom of the pit was actually far larger than anyone could have imagined. It seemed that the pit was actually a tunnel, beyond which was an enormous world. The world seemed to have no end. Even divine sense was incapable of finding any borders to it. After everyone reached the bottom and stood there, their minds trembled. Meng Hao's pupils constricted and he began to pant. Next to him, Su Qing arrived and her mind reeled. Nobody spoke. Complete silence reigned. Everyone was completely and thoroughly astonished by what they saw. A continent stretched out in all directions, sleek and smooth. Its surface was like that of a mirror, which was the source of the light that everyone had seen earlier. If the continent could be described as a mirror, then the group from South Heaven could be described as standing outside of that mirror. Furthermore, when they looked at the mirror, what they saw was not their own reflection, but rather an ancient battlefield. Shockingly, an ancient world existed inside of the mirror. It was impossible to say whether or not it was an ancient world that existed before the time period of the second plane, or after. In any case, the group was now staring at boundless, majestic battlefield. Countless cultivators could be seen on the battlefield, all engaged in mutual slaughter. Heaven and earth were filled with riotous colors, and booming echoed out through the sky. Cracks spread out through the land, and the fearsome glow of magical shields covered everything. In the sky were innumerable war chariots flying about, as well as armored cultivators who fought each other feverishly. Off in the distance, several gigantic dragons could be seen, as well as countless demon beasts hunkered into various positions throughout the land. Many things could be seen. A person could be seen waving a hand. A huge chunk of the earth collapsed, and then an enormous land mass flew out. It turned into a shooting star which smashed out into the air. A person could be seen punching. Stars collapsed and countless flames burned the world. A person could be seen surrounded by millions of magical items. They formed a tempest that caused blood to splash about wherever it went. The tempest itself was the color of blood. A person could be seen flashing an incantation gesture. A finger was pointed up into the sky, and countless characters appeared, glowing with a golden light. They formed together into various ancient characters that radiated a shocking aura which led to endless slaughter. A person could be seen holding tight to an evil spirit. The spirit's body was 3,000 meters long, and had countless faces that appeared and disappeared, howling and glancing around with disdain. This was a great battle between two different parties. One side was made up of cultivators. Countless, innumerable cultivators, each one capable of employing destructive divine abilities, of summoning Dharma incarnations, and endless magical items that could shake the heavens. The other side was made up of demons. These were bizarre greater demons of heaven and earth, surrounded by sundered winds that rose up into the sky, creating a storm of blackness wherever they went. Further off in the distance was, shockingly, an enormous coffin. The coffin appeared to have fallen down from the heavens. Brilliant, multicolored light swirled around it, within which was something astonishing. 9 butterflies could be seen floating about. Countless figures could be seen in the area around the coffin. Incredible slaughter was being carried out, as if neither side was willing to allow the other to step even half a pace closer to the coffin. The coffin was the main cause of the combat on the battlefield. All of the fighting and mad slaughter was because that coffin needed to be seized. All of the South Heaven cultivators, including Meng Hao, were floating up in midair, looking down blankly at the lands within the mirror. They looked down at the shocking battle, and the figures who could topple mountains and invert seas with the wave of a hand, who could crush stars and grab moons with their divine abilities. The hearts of the South Heaven cultivators filled with shock. There were 3 people on the battlefield who, no matter how grand the scale of the battle was, no matter how intense the slaughter, could not be eclipsed. The gaze of anyone who looked down at the battle would instantly be drawn to these 3 figures. It was as if they were the most powerful sovereigns of the battle. They were like venerated sons that everyone had to look up to. One of them was a cultivator wearing a Taoist robe with a full head of white hair. His features were ancient, and when he lifted up his hands 2 rotating pearls could be seen, one of which was black, the other of which was white. Behind the man was an illusory starry sky that he had apparently magically summoned. He stood in the middle of the sky, alone, capable of striking fear into the hearts of any within the demon tribes. The second figure was within the demon tribes. It was a greater demon who looked like a winged bat. Its eyes were bright red, and 7 globes of flame rotated around it. Each of the globes of flame was a different color, and shockingly, a wooden sword could be seen inside of each one. The demon was surrounded by an astonishing aura. As it stood there, it seemed capable of making the earth, the heavens, and all life therein prostrate in worship. Meng Hao was unsure of the level of cultivation base of these 2, but his breathing was unprecedentedly ragged. He wasn't sure if he was perceiving things incorrectly or not, but when he saw the old cultivator and the black and white pearls in his hands, he suddenly thought of something. In his mind, he saw an image from back in the state of Zhao. He saw the pearl in the hand of Little Tiger. 1. Little Tiger, Dong, who was one of the group of 4 who joined the Reliance sect at the same time. Meng Hao encountered him again in Chapter 71, where he had the pearl. During Meng Hao's fight with Shang Yuan Ziu in Chapter 75, Little Tiger loaned him the pearl, which allowed Meng Hao to temporarily break into the 10th level of qi condensation. Meng Hao returned the pearl to him in Chapter 76. You might also be able to deduce that the pearl was even alluded to vaguely in Chapter 19. Little tiger's pearl and the white pearl in the old man's hand looked completely the same. The sensation that Meng Hao got when he looked at the pearl held by the old man led him to believe that they were definitely one and the same. Furthermore, the man-shaped bat looked very similar to the demon that he had fought so long ago. Even more relevant were the wooden swords inside the 7 globes of flame that surrounded it. When Meng Hao saw them, his mind shook. Those swords were clearly the same as his immortal murdering swords. Right now he had 5 such swords, 4 originals and 1 copy. What gave Meng Hao even more cause to pant was the third figure within the world of the mirror. That person caused his mind to reel and fill with a roaring sound. That person was a homely-looking middle-aged man. He wore a white robe and his long hair was half black and half white. He did not emit any aura of a cultivation base, but rather floated there in midair, looking almost like he was sealed. The air around him was completely calm and still. When the demon tribe saw him, they trembled, and their demonic chi was thrown into chaos, as if it was completely out of control. When the cultivators saw him, their eyes filled with reverence. It was almost as if as soon as they looked at him, an intense pressure bore down on them, causing their cultivation bases to decline. He was not a member of either side in this battle. He floated there in midair, making it seem as if the battlefield were split into 3 parts, with him being 1/3. Within the man's hand was a long, silver spear that appeared to be covered with overlapping scales. The spear was not completely silver. Occasionally the scales would turn black. As soon as Meng Hao caught sight of the spear, a voice immediately echoed out in his mind. Demon Weapon, Lonlatum. 2. Demon Weapon Lonlatum was introduced in Chapter 497. Although Lonlatum's devil construct was on the verge of dissipating completely, Meng Hao still had it. It emanated a buzzing sound, like an intense summoning. In that instant, Meng Hao suddenly realized who that middle-aged man was floating there in midair. Staring fixedly at him, Meng Hao thought, 3rd generation, demon sealer. Chapter 614, Seal. Meng Hao suddenly realized that the copper mirror in his bag of holding, with him since the Reliance sect, had begun vibrating. This vibration differed from those near furred or feathered creatures. It was intense, encompassing the entire mirror. Meng Hao was shocked, but his expression didn't change. His gaze flashed toward Demon Weapon Lonlatum. When he'd first encountered Demon Weapon Lonlatum, he received the devil construct, incarnated into the devil's spear. He'd also learned that the real Demon Weapon Lonlatum was sealed within an ancient battlefield. He knew the ancient battlefield was linked to the demon immortal sect. Inside it, he should have been able to use the devil construct's reaction to locate Lonlatum. However, throughout the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd planes he'd found no trail, yet here in the 4th plane, he finally had one. The white-robed man with black and white hair could only be the 3rd generation demon sealer, and the spear in his hand, Demon Weapon Lonlatum. One man, one spear, hovering in midair, splitting everything under heaven into 3 parts. His energy shook the demon tribes and pressed immensely upon the cultivators. Though perhaps not the ultimate supremacy, he commanded utmost respect in heaven and earth. Meng Hao's mind trembled as he looked at the 3rd generation demon sealer, his breathing becoming heavy. This truly was a demon sealer. Seeing the 3rd generation demon sealer's energy, Meng Hao felt intense anticipation for his own path as the 9th generation demon sealer. He wished to hover in midair and split everything under heaven. The events inside the mirror continent shocked Meng Hao and all the South Heaven cultivators. The emaciated old man's eyes flickered, the one who'd been first to enter from the 3rd plane. He teleported toward the mirror below. The movement immediately drew notice. Meng Hao's eyes glittered as he watched. The emaciated old man moved at stunning speed, standing on the mirror's surface. He moved forward as if entering the ancient battlefield, but only traversed the mirror's surface. He stopped abruptly. He pushed his hand onto the mirror's surface, stimulating distortions. A middle-aged man appeared in the ancient world, clad in battle armor. As he raised his hand, a fireball materialized with a crimson bird visible within. All visible things existed only within the mirror. Yet stimulated by the old man's action, the crimson bird flew out. It seemed to have broken through some seal, flying free from the mirror. It shrank and its flames dimmed, looking quite different from inside the mirror. Yet as it emerged, it emanated a powerful aura. The flame bird wasn't alone. 4 beams of light shot through the distortions, revealing 2 swords, a fan, and a flying shuttle. The 4 items flew out behind the flame bird. The old man laughed and flew into the air, waving his sleeve to capture it. In an instant, dozens flew toward the four beams and items within. Meng Hao moved fastest. As the old man subdued the flame bird, Meng Hao seized the green flying shuttle. It was shaped like an awl glittering with blinding light. The cold it emanated was oppressive. As soon as Meng Hao touched it, his body felt filled with winter. Eyes glittering, he entered the second anima and clutched the shuttle. His body flickered as he stretched his left hand. A gale wind screamed out, sending the Jai clan members and Northern Reaches cultivators pursuing the fan tumbling back. Before they recovered, Meng Hao swept forward to seize it. Upon touching it, indescribable heat exploded within him. Meng Hao gave a cold snort and entered the fifth anima without hesitation. His fleshly body and cultivation base instantly suppressed them. They struggled but couldn't escape his grasp. He stowed them in his bag of holding. Meanwhile, others seized the two flying swords. Fang Yu and Jai Mingkang each took one. Everyone else watched with unsightly expressions, then looked at the emaciated old man. The old man finally put away the flame bird. His acquisition was clearly the best of all. Though the others were extraordinary, the flame bird was far superior. The old man laughed hoarsely, then glanced at the South Heaven group. His gaze stopped on Meng Hao and filled with dread. Finally, he looked back at the others. Fellow Taoists, there is much good fortune here. There's no need to watch me collect it, is there? He chuckled and backed a few paces, raising his right hand, though casual, pulsating rings of light emanated from it. Jai Mingkang's position among the Jai clan members was second only to the now-deceased Jai Mingfeng. He looked at the old man and growled, "There may be more good fortune, but you know far more than we do." Everyone's eyes glittered with interest. How had the old man extracted items from the mirror? The old man laughed, then slowly began to speak. "Well, it's quite simple. Any of you can do as I did. This is the fourth plane and few people make it here. Few outsiders know what it's like. The mirror-like continent beneath us is a seal. Sealed inside is a battlefield, or perhaps an entire world. Within the seal, time is eternal. If you stimulate it and open a breach, you create a storm within the eternal time inside. It's like causing a reverse black hole. Objects inside are sucked out to scatter in the outside world. That process weakens them. As for the method, there's no need for detailed explanation. The battlefield beneath us is enormous, and acquisitions depend on your own luck." The old man glanced once more at the crowd, then shot off at top speed. Everyone else looked at the mirror with glittering eyes. All had their own judgments of his words. Regardless, 80 to 90% seemed true. In that case, this place was a once-in-a-lifetime source of good fortune for all of them. Everyone exchanged glances. The Jai clan members scattered. Cultivators from the northern reaches, southern domain, and western desert sped off. Meng Hao looked at Su Qing. "I'm fine by myself," she said with a slight smile. She turned and flew off into the distance, looking for good fortune of her own. Meng Hao took a deep breath and looked at the world within the mirror. His eyes flickered as he picked a direction and shot off. His sole objective was the third-generation demon sealer. Everything else paled compared to the League of Demon Sealers. He flew for the duration of half an incense stick. He considered how strange this place was, particularly the three most powerful experts hovering in the mirror world, visible yet unapproachable. The mirror continent seemed endless and without borders, yet it had distant limits, but on its surface it appeared limitless. After traveling far, the third demon sealer still seemed distant. Meng Hao muttered when his eyes suddenly flashed. Not far away, a magical battle raged within the mirror world. Two cultivators fought a mass of black fog. Magical techniques erupted and items slammed out. Seeing them, Meng Hao's eyes glittered. One item was a golden leaf he'd normally ignore, yet upon its surface was a pattern like a lotus. It was made up of 10 swords, shaped to form a lotus. It looked just like Meng Hao's lotus sword formation. He made an E sound and raised his right hand, punching down. The mirror's surface trembled. Distortions appeared like a vortex, then quickly dissipated. Meng Hao's expression remained unchanged as he entered the fifth anima. A boom erupted from his fleshly body as he punched again. A vortex and black hole formed instantly. Enormous gravitational force erupted within the mirror world, drawing 3 magical items in. Next, the 3 items flew out beneath Meng Hao. One cracked and exploded. The other 2 shot off in opposite directions, seemingly sentient. Meng Hao teleported, transforming into green smoke and a black moon. He reappeared and snatched at the golden leaf. It buzzed and blinded, intending to cut his hand in half. Meng Hao let out a cold snort and flicked his sleeve to collect the golden leaf. He pressed 2 fingers onto its surface, preventing its escape. Joy appeared in his eyes as he collected it, but as he looked back at the mirror world, his mind trembled. He realized that the golden leaf, the exploded item, and the escaped one were all still inside the mirror world. Are they simply ghosts, he thought? Or are the items which flew out perhaps not real? He frowned, remembering how the copper mirror had begun to vibrate. After some thought, Meng Hao trembled and looked back at the mirror world. This chapter was sponsored by Daniel Dunn, Thunder PKO, Tomislav Fistrick, Salim Mudrik Baraba, Christophe Bari, Ibrahim Tamra Aktuak, and Yanwar Yapatra. Chapter 615, Speculation and Cooperation. This continent is like a mirror, and within the mirror is a battlefield, murmured Meng Hao. The objects on the battlefield can emerge into the outside, yet those same objects still remain inside the mirror. This, his mind raced. He felt he knew what was happening, but the explanation made him pant, his face flickering. Strange, it's so similar to the copper mirror and its duplication powers. That was what agitated him. Only he could make such a connection. No one else had his copper mirror, nor did they know of its heaven-defying qualities. Therefore, no one could reach the same conclusion. After all, thinking is limited by what one knows. Thinking beyond one's scope is extremely difficult. His breathing grew heavier as the situation grew more bizarre. His eyes flickered and he suddenly leaped up, changing direction to go straight up. As he rose, his heart pounded faster and he grew nervous. He possessed the copper mirror for many years and often wondered where it came from. But the meat, jelly, and parrot were always enigmatic about it, treating it as taboo. The parrot would even fume with rage. Meng Hao had tried numerous times to get information, all to no avail. Eventually, he let the matter rest. Now, however, he felt he suddenly had an opportunity to understand the copper mirror. In such a state, he flew higher and higher. Moments later, he'd reached the highest area. The continent stretched below in all directions. He took a deep breath and looked down. As before, it looked completely endless. The surface was sleek and glossy, impossible to discern its shape. I could keep going and look for the border. Maybe I can find answers there. Or I could take out the copper mirror and shine it down. Perhaps that would reveal clues. He thoughtfully rubbed his bag of holding, a profound gleam in his eyes. If he produced the copper mirror and nothing happened, it wouldn't matter. But if transformations occurred, they would shake heaven and earth. With so many people here, he couldn't hide the copper mirror without killing everyone. The copper mirror is the most mysterious object I possess. I can't let anyone know about it, or it will lead to terrible calamity. The innocent man will be lead to disaster by possessing a treasured object. His eyes glittered. Intelligent even as a child, he had experienced the law of the jungle in the cultivation world. He knew all too well what would happen if he revealed the copper mirror. After some thought, his eyes flickered and he turned to look into the distance, a cold smile tugging at his lips. Even as he smiled, distortions appeared in the air. An old man emerged, the emaciated cultivator from before. He'd been approaching secretly but was detected by Meng Hao. He revealed himself without waiting. Fellow Taoist Meng, your cultivation base is extraordinary. It seems I've incurred your ridicule. The old man laughed and clasped hands in a bow. Seeing Meng Hao would not respond, the old man smiled and continued. My name is Han Danzi One. Han Danzi's name in Chinese is Chinese letter Han Danzai. Han is a common family name, and yes, it is the same character as Han Bei. That doesn't mean they are related, although the possibility couldn't be precluded based on the name alone. Dan means red or pellet. Zai means child or son, a rogue cultivator from the southern domain. Your fame has resounded for many years, fellow Taoist Meng. Grandmaster Pill Cauldron is an example for cultivators like myself. I'm happy to meet you here in the ancient demon immortal sect. Did you secretly follow me just to say fawning words? Said Meng Hao, a cold glint in his eyes. State your purpose. Fellow Taoist Meng, you don't beat around the bush, he laughed, ignoring Meng Hao's tone. I saw you hesitating earlier. I wasn't sure what you were thinking, but I was curious and followed you. However, I do have something interesting to share with you. The greatest treasures here are not the cultivators and demon tribes' items, but those held by the 3 paragons. The spear, 7 globes of fire and wood, and 2 pearls are all shocking treasures. Anyone could enable a cultivator to murder an immortal. As Han Danzi spoke, he observed Meng Hao, but Meng Hao's expression revealed no change. This guy is smart and has a rock-hard will. Han Danzi thought with an imperceptible frown. I won't fool him easily. Meng Hao looked coldly at the old man. For some reason, vigilance rose within him. He appeared to be at the great circle of the nascent soul stage, not far from spirit severing. Yet what he'd accomplished with the flame bird wasn't something a great circle nascent soul could do. This man hid something mysterious. Perhaps others wouldn't sense it, but as the ninth-generation demon sealer, Meng Hao could tell the man had two auras. The first contained a cultivator's ripples. The other was deeply hidden with demonic qi. This demonic qi was borderline vile. Han Danzi looked at Meng Hao and said, I can't get those treasures by myself. That's why I hope to form a cooperation with you, elder brother Meng. After we acquire them, we split evenly. Which one do you want? Asked Meng Hao, his eyes glittering. The 7 globes of fire from the demon tribe's paragon, said Han Danzi with a smile. We can extract one for each of us. That way we don't waste energy. Meng Hao smiled and nodded in agreement. Seeing Meng Hao agree so easily caused vigilance to rise in Han Danzi. Of all the South Heaven people, he'd paid closest attention to Patriarch Huyan. But he'd recently sensed that Patriarch Huyan was killed. When he laid eyes on Meng Hao, he understood that Meng Hao had killed him. Considering his own techniques and trump cards, Han Danzi felt at ease. With a hearty laugh, he and Meng Hao turned into colorful beams that shot off. Meng Hao didn't speak. He suppressed any notion of producing the copper mirror. Now wasn't the time. He needed to wait for the right critical juncture, then pull out the copper mirror to see if it provoked transformations. It seemed Han Danzi was bringing him to just such a juncture. Han Danzi was wrapped in his own thoughts as they proceeded onward. Before long, they reached the very center of the continent. The 3 paragons are where the seal is strongest over this ancient battlefield, said Han Danzi with a smile. Special restrictive spells prevent anyone from getting close. However, I know a special technique. I tested it earlier and it bypasses the spells, but it requires a certain cultivation base. Elder brother Meng, your cultivation base is extraordinary, so you shouldn't have problems. With that, he shot down toward the continent. He quickly performed an incantation with his right hand, then pushed down on the surface. Instantly, the land shook and a vortex formed in the mirror. No black hole appeared and it maintained its shape. Han Danzi took a deep breath and lifted his hand. He stood. The vortex remained. Han Danzi turned to Meng Hao. Elder brother Meng, you know what to do. I'll wait up ahead. His body flickered and he moved forward. The vortex beneath his feet followed. Meng Hao's eyes glittered as Han Danzi proceeded onward for what appeared to be several hundred meters. But he'd actually traveled several hundred kilometers. Interesting, murmured Meng Hao. He moved down to the surface and landed. He lifted his foot and slammed it down. A boom sounded and a vortex appeared beneath his feet in the mirror world. It maintained its vortex state, connecting to Meng Hao's cultivation base. Then he proceeded forward. For every meter he moved, he actually moved half a kilometer. What a technique, he thought, his eyes flickering. If this technique worked in the outside world, it would be an incredibly powerful divine ability. Using it, Meng Hao and Han Danzi moved what appeared to be several hundred meters, but was actually hundreds of kilometers. They sped along in the center region of the mirror continent. Meanwhile, other South Heaven cultivators were in other locations, attempting to acquire good fortune. They stimulated the land to make it spit out items, but most were destroyed in the process. Few cultivators acquired anything. Still, the mirror-like land was a huge treasure trove. All cultivators here were wise and intelligent, and soon their glittering eyes turned to the center region, clearly the location of the 3 most powerful experts. More than a few were trying to make their way in that direction. 2 hours passed. Meng Hao and Han Danzi had just appeared near the greater demon with the 7 rotating globes of fire. A strange light appeared in Han Danzi's eyes. He took a deep breath and exchanged a glance with Meng Hao. He began to rotate his cultivation base. Meng Hao entered the 5th anima. His fleshly body was shocking, his cultivation base boundless. Han Danzi's eyes flickered as he unleashed his full power. The twisted demonic qi within him began to circulate. The 2 attacked the surface together, causing enormous rumbling. The 2 vortexes beneath them suddenly touched. They merged, then ripped open an enormous black hole. The gravitational force was impossible to describe, yet it couldn't make the 7 globules of fire tremble. Other magical items were sucked into the vortex. 10 items were sucked in, but only 5 flew out in beams of prismatic light. Han Danzi's eyes flickered, but he made no move to take them. Meng Hao's eyes flashed. yet he didn't chase either. Both were wrapped in their own thoughts, watching the 5 beams shoot like beautiful pearls into the sky. Meanwhile, the other South Heaven cultivators watched in shock. They looked at the 5 beams and sensed the intense ripples within. Incredible treasure, that was their collective thought. Their eyes shone brightly as they flew up. In an instant, nearly all South Heaven cultivators flew from all directions toward the 5 beams. Chapter 616. Demonic Chi explodes to the sky. Rumbling echoed in all directions. As South Heaven cultivators flew toward the 5 beams, fighting broke out. Magical techniques and divine abilities resounded, mixed with growls and cold snorts. In moments, the 5 treasures were divided up. Handanzi looked up and said, "Fellow Taoists, those 5 treasures were released by the combined effort of fellow Taoist Meng and myself. For you to act in such a way is improper." The South Heaven cultivators up above had taken notice of Meng Hao and Handanzi below. "If you're interested, fellow Taoists, we can work together to open the greatest treasures hidden here. We can release them together. What do you think?" Handanzi smiled, but within his eyes was a strange, imperceptible glow. From the corner of his eyes, he watched Meng Hao carefully. He hadn't consulted Meng Hao before speaking, and his offer didn't match his previous explanation. Clearly, he needed not just Meng Hao's help, but the combined assistance of almost all the South Heaven cultivators. Handanzi couldn't read Meng Hao's expression. From beginning to now, it hadn't changed. The more Meng Hao remained expressionless, the more unsure Handanzi felt. He'd sought out Meng Hao for his cultivation base. He wasn't alone. Though no one admitted it, most believed Meng Hao had the most powerful base in the group. Having Meng Hao at his side made Handanzi's words more persuasive. When an expert planned a scheme, it wouldn't be small. The others' eyes flickered, but no one spoke. Though they'd been conned by Meng Hao earlier, circumstances had forced it. They couldn't help being excited now. Of course, each was extraordinarily intelligent, so they only believed about 1/3 of Handanzi's words. Fang Yu suddenly spoke. "If treasure appears, how do we split it?" "I will swear a Tao oath on my heart of cultivation. No matter how many treasures appear, I only want one fire globe." Handanzi spoke with chopping, iron-slicing decisiveness. "Besides," he continued solemnly, his words ringing like golden bells, "if I violated my oath, not only would it sever my cultivation path, but I'd never find safe haven in any of your sects and clans in South Heaven." The South Heaven cultivators looked thoughtful. Handanzi was right. Though their cultivation bases weren't incredibly high, they were backed by major sects and clans, so they weren't worried about Handanzi breaking his promise. Everyone exchanged glances, thinking different things but not revealing them facially. Gradually, all eyes fell on Meng Hao. "I too require simply a Tao oath pledge," he said coolly. At first, silence. Then the Jai clan members flew down. After them, Fang Yu and the others from the southern domain and northern reaches. Their eyes flickered as they neared. But not every South Heaven cultivator came. Su Qing and some others weren't present. Handanzi smiled and explained how to approach the center district. As they waited, he clasped hands and bowed apologetically to Meng Hao. "Fellow Taoist Meng," he said sincerely, "I didn't change my mind. As you see, relying only on our power would be difficult. Only combining power with the others will succeed. I hope you forgive me." He bowed deeply. Then he lifted his right hand, revealing a jade pendant shaped like a dragon. "I acquired this earlier, an excellent treasure. It can summon an enormous dragon that spits out a sea. Fellow Taoist Meng, please accept it as a token of apology." He sent the pendant floating toward Meng Hao. Meng Hao's face was expressionless as he examined the pendant and scanned it with divine sense. Nothing seemed suspicious, so he casually waved his sleeve to collect it. "Thank you, fellow Taoist Handanzi," he said coolly. Handanzi watched calmly as Meng Hao accepted the pendant. Inwardly, he was suspicious. Meng Hao's expressionless demeanor made it hard to keep his thoughts straight. "HMPH," he thought. "He's just a kid from the younger generation. Though he might be a profound schemer, he has limits. Besides, I made clear I want only one globe. I don't believe Meng Hao can create problems from nothing." He was laughing coldly inside, but outside, he smiled ear to ear. They sat cross-legged to meditate. 2 hours passed, then the other South Heaven cultivators arrived one by one. No one spoke. They focused their power into one spot on the ground. Intense rumbling resulted, and a gigantic whirlpool appeared in the mirror world. The vortex spun rapidly and transformed into a black hole. Magical items were sucked in. Many shattered, but more than 10 beams of light shot into the sky. The treasure light was blinding and instantly attracted attention. But everyone, including Meng Hao, looked back at the mirror world. The vortex remained, as did the black hole's gravitational force. Unfortunately, it wasn't powerful enough to suck away the 7 fire globes surrounding the greater demon. Yet the 2 globes nearest the black hole were beginning to ripple and distort. If the black hole's power increased, they might move. "One more time," snapped Handanzi, staring at the globes. The full power of his cultivation base exploded out. As it built, the others' eyes flickered and they too unleashed their cultivation bases. Meng Hao closed his eyes. When he opened them, he was in the 6th anima. Boom! Everyone attacked again. Vibration seemed enough to cause earthquakes and shatter mountains. A vortex even larger than before appeared in the mirror world. The black hole caused the 2 nearest fire globes to distort violently. Finally, they began to move. As they moved, everything dimmed and the majestic aura of a precious treasure poured into the black hole and released outside. A thunderous roar filled the air. Everyone was completely shocked. This aura seemed it could extinguish immortals. Meng Hao's pupils constricted. The aura from the wooden swords in the globes far exceeded that of the swords in his bag, yet they were one and the same. Handanzi said nothing more. Longing appeared in the South Heaven cultivators' eyes as they unleashed explosive power and their most powerful divine abilities. Handanzi took a deep breath. The borderline evil demonic chi within him, only Meng Hao could sense, suddenly superseded his cultivator fluctuations. He'd become a demon. Meng Hao entered the 7th anima, a spirit severing fleshly body. He and the others continued attacking the ground. The entire area cracked. Though the cracks sealed nearly immediately, a huge 30-meter vortex exploded in the mirror world. The vortex's edges were just about to touch the wooden swords within the flame globes. Everyone was panting, focused on the spinning vortex as it transformed into a shocking black hole. When it appeared, 3 of the 7 fire globes containing wooden swords began to ripple and vibrate. Suddenly, they started moving. The South Heaven cultivators' gazes grew sharp as knives. Their cultivation bases rotated as they waited for treasures to emerge. Time passed, about 10 breaths, yet it seemed like an eternity. They watched the 3 fire globes move gradually closer to the black hole. They struggled, but the black hole's power pulled them closer. The black hole's gravitational power didn't come from the cultivators, but from the interaction between the outside world and the mirror world. The cultivators merely released that power. The gravitational force was so strong that it affected not just the 3 fire globes, but also the extremely lifelike greater demon around which they rotated. Nearer, nearer. In an instant, 1 wooden sword vanished into the black hole. Everyone stopped breathing. A wooden sword shot out from beneath their feet, bursting skyward in a beam of light like unrolling silk. The Jai clan members instantly shot up to pursue the beam. Next, 2 more swords shot out, their sword chi shining like a rainbow. Coldness radiated, making everyone feel frozen. Yet the burning in their hearts couldn't freeze. Fang Yu, the Northern Reaches group, and all others instantly shot up to pursue the swords. As they flew, the 3 swords emanated even more shocking energy. Boundless ripples shot into the sky, causing anything within to move exponentially slower. The swords created their own time and space. Meng Hao immediately shot up after them, and Handanzi followed. It appeared they'd fight over the swords, but Handanzi only appeared to move up. He almost immediately sank back down. As others chased the treasures, he prostrated himself, biting his tongue to spit blood. The blood turned into a stream extending toward the black hole. It emerged in the mirror world and neared the greater demon sucked toward it. Ancestor spirit, your younger generation posterity have not forgotten you. I welcome your power back into the world. As his words rang out, the greater demon's eyes flickered with intelligence. It allowed the bloodstream to circle its body, tighten around it, and drag it toward the black hole. Everything shook violently and booming filled the air. Suddenly, an enormous vortex appeared before Handanzi, thousands of meters wide. A strange demonic sound emerged, like people weeping and laughing. Suddenly, an enormous head, 300 meters large, began to rise from the water-like surface. Demonic chi exploded into the sky. This chapter was sponsored by AETZE Boersma, Sean L., Philippe de Almeida Arajo Vital, Stefan from Sweden, and Li Yang. Chapter 617, Land of the Three Saints. Scattered hair patches covered the 300-meter head, along with 3 pitch-black horns. It was gray as death, wrinkles covering its skin. The features resembled a man, but more so, a lion. It emanated a fearsome, archaic aura that, as soon as it appeared, swept across the entire fourth plane, which began to shake violently. An enormous vortex, tens of thousands of meters wide, circulated around the area. Amidst the rumbling, wild wind swept through, shaking everything. Handanzi prostrated beneath the head, excited. His appearance was changing, no longer human. 3 black horns sprouted from his head, making him similar to the head above. Your younger generation posterity welcomes the return of ancestral power, Handanzi cried excitedly. As his voice rang out, he formed a connection with the head. Shocking power began to fuse into his body. His hair whipped about, his clothes flapped. He should have been tossed about like a leaf within the maelstrom, but instead, from his aura, it seemed that he was accepting some type of legacy. Head appeared to be 300 meters large, but in the blink of an eye it was suddenly far larger. It was now 3,000 meters large. A breath of time later, it was back to 300 meters. They were like ghost images, distorting the world. Rumbling rose up into the sky. All of the crowds up in midair who were chasing after the wooden swords didn't even have a chance to begin fighting over the precious treasures before the scene unfolding caused them to be thoroughly astonished. The wild wind raged, sweeping across everything. Everyone up above was sent spinning out of control, causing their faces to fill with unprecedented expressions of astonishment. What is that thing? Damn it, he's actually trying to release a greater demon from inside the mirror. Isn't that demon one of 3 major powers inside the mirror world? Who is this guy? Shocked, everyone began to fall back. The rest of the cultivators in the land, the ones not participating in the events in the central region, including Su Qing, were all incredibly shocked. They, too, were incapable of preventing themselves from being swept up. They transformed into beams of light that shot through the air. Meng Hao's eyes glittered as he hovered in the 7th anima, with a spirit-severing fleshly body and cultivation base of 64 great circle nascent souls. Though he hovered unstably, such power let him remain balanced within the vortex. He looked down at the surface, his eyes narrowing. He knew Handanzi had plotted something, but never imagined the plan would be so astonishing. As of this moment, a deafening roar filled the enormous vortex, the source being none other than the enormous head emerging from within the world of the mirror. The sound echoed back and forth like thunder. It caused everyone, even the cultivators off in the distance, to cough up blood. Handanzi was unaffected, and Meng Hao's face was only a bit pale. Other than the two of them, everyone else felt their minds spinning, as if they were stuck in some interminable illusion. By now, the head of the greater demon was more than 70% emerged. Its nose was visible, and its facial features were clearer. There was an enormous, ferocious-looking wound ripped into its face. Anyone who even glanced at the greater demon would immediately feel as if their mind was being absorbed. Before they even realized it, pulses of terror would be racing through them. Demonic chi exploded up, filling the area, intrinsically potent. In the blink of an eye, all other power of heaven and earth was expelled from the world by this powerful demonic chi. All of a sudden, the entire world became a demon world. Handanzi trembled, his face burning with passion. The physical changes to him continued at high speed. His aura exploded up, and his connection to the head grew even more complete. At the same time, all of the power of heaven and earth that was not demonic chi rushed up to the top of the world, which was none other than deep tunnel everyone had traveled through to get to this place. A rumbling sound could be heard as the energy successfully entered the tunnel. The countless vines inside withered in the blink of an eye. They vanished without a trace as the expelled power of heaven and earth shot out into the outside world. If you could stand outside of that deep pit, what you would see would be an exploding pillar of chi that shot up into the sky. Successive layers of ripples then emanated out in all directions, sweeping over everything. Although the process had just begun inside the fourth plane, it is easy to imagine how quickly everything was changing because of the emergence of the greater demon from within the world of the mirror. When the changes were complete, everyone else inside would either be dead or would be transformed by the demonic chi. Their souls would be transformed and their cultivation bases would change on a fundamental level. They would no longer be cultivators but demons. Meng Hao's face flickered as he looked up into the sky at all the people from South Heaven. The vortex was spinning faster, and as it did, everyone was lapsing into a stupor. Fang Yu, the Jai clan, the cultivators from the northern reaches and southern domain, Wang Lihai, Han Bei, Li Tiandao, Li Shiki, and also Su Qing. Everyone seemed to be lapsing into an illusion. Their faces were twisted and their teeth were clenched. Occasionally they let out cold laughs, other times their expressions were blank. It was bizarre to the extreme. Demonic chi was coalescing around their bodies, clearly beginning to make some illusory changes. Handanzi continued to prostrate himself on the ground. Land of the Three Saints. The power of the ancestor returns, a legacy for me, Handanzi. Everyone here are my sacrificial objects. Their bodies will be changed, their spirits will be assimilated. If they don't die in the process, then they will no longer be cultivators, but demons. They will become my demon horde, and will follow by my side as I use the power of the ancestor to battle with the heavens. He trembled as his words echoed out through the vortex. At the same time, the vortex which spun around the head of the greater demon was no longer tens of thousands of meters wide. It expanded again until it was nearly 300,000 meters wide, shocking to the extreme. By this point, the top lip of the great demon was now visible. It was now possible to see that the head did not just have one wound on it, but rather three. One of the wounds appeared to be on its lips, making it so that the creature did not have two lips but four. Also visible were sharp black fangs. This greater demon's physical appearance was savage to the extreme. More demonic chi rolled about, and the rumbling sounds grew more intense. Meng Hao's eyes glittered. This is the ancient demon immortal sect. Qi Jiusi isn't dead. He couldn't possibly ignore what is happening here, could he? And what about Xianxia? Her attitude is difficult to discern. So, why has Qi Jiusi made an appearance? It doesn't matter. I can't place all my hope in him. Although he could afford not to care too much about the others, Su Qing was here. Also, the others owed a lot of spirit stones. If a few died, he could handle it. However, if they all died, well, that was something Meng Hao just couldn't agree to let happen. His eyes filled with a bright glow and he took a deep breath. He closed his eyes for a moment, then reopened them. The moment he opened his eyes, Meng Hao entered, the eighth anima. Boom! In the eighth anima, his fleshly body grew even more powerful. In the seventh anima, it was of the spirit severing stage, but in the eighth anima, it reached an even more terrifying level. His cultivation base exploded out, not with the power of 64 great circle nascent souls, but rather 128. Such incredible power caused profound changes. Meng Hao suddenly appeared in midair in the wild vortex, buffeted by the spinning winds. Roaring surrounded him as what appeared to be countless shapeless bolts of lightning exploded out. His right hand formed into a fist that punched directly toward the passageway high up in the sky. The punch contained not just the full power of his cultivation base, but also the mountain-consuming incantation. An enormous mountain peak appeared, which was none other than the fourth peak. The image was somewhat indistinct, but as soon as it appeared, roaring sounds echoed out. It shot toward the passageway. As it flew through the air, parts of it disintegrated and fell apart, but by the time it reached its destination, it was still half intact. The mountain shot at top speed toward the passageway, and as it neared, Meng Hao uttered a single word. Collapse. As soon as the word left his mouth, the illusory mountain stopped in midair and exploded, sending out a sound like endless thunder. The volume exceeded the rumbling of the vortex, transforming into shocking sound waves that swept across the world. Because of the sound, all of the others, including Su Qing, were mentally shaken. The illusion which gripped them temporarily vanished, and their eyes grew clear. Then their faces filled with astonishment. Meng Hao looked up at them and roared, "Why haven't you left yet?" He performed a double-handed incantation, and immediately tempest winds exploded out from him to fight back against the vortex. Instantly, the vortex was weakened. Fang Yu gasped and looked down at Meng Hao. She looked anxious but at the same time determined. Her body flickered as she neared Su Qing. Even as Su Qing was gazing at Meng Hao, Fang Yu grabbed her. "Let's go," she said. "He won't stop worrying until you're out of here." Su Qing hesitated but didn't struggle. She looked back at Meng Hao one more time and an indescribable feeling welled up in her heart. She thought back to that year outside the rebirth cave. It was a scene just like this one in which she was no help at all to Meng Hao. The South Heaven cultivators were panting in astonishment at the terrifying scene playing out. One by one, they began to fly up toward the passageway overhead. As they shot through the air and then entered into the passageway, they heard Meng Hao's voice. "I saved your lives, which means you owe me. If you dare to not pay me back, things won't be finished between us." As everyone disappeared into the passageway, the expulsion power shoved them up, causing them shoot upward. It was in that same instant that the head of the greater demon completely emerged from within the mirror. Off to the side, Handanzi looked up at Meng Hao, and at everyone leaving through the passageway. "They can't escape the land of the three saints," said Han Danzi. "Though this is only the ancestors' divine clone, if I unseal it, it benefits the demon immortal sect. Its spirits won't help but won't resist. Not even true spirit night will awaken. Sleeping night is intelligent, but awakened night has no mind. It won't awaken, for it doesn't wish to. This is true spirit night's body, where its brain exists. They can't escape or flee the demon immortal sect. When the ancestors' divine clone fully fuses with me, they become my demon horde. As for you, Meng Hao, you will be beneath the sacred ancestor and myself to act as Dharma protector." "Oh yeah," replied Meng Hao, looking coldly at Han Danzi. He performed an incantation gesture with his right hand, then pointed down at the land. At the same time, the demonic qi in the area began to swirl around Meng Hao. Whistling sounds could be heard intermittently. Meng Hao suddenly began to perform an incantation gesture, which seemed to cause everything in the area to tremble. In that instant, all of the demonic qi in the entire world began to rotate, as if it were being pulled. Every region began to distort, making the entire world seem as if it were being twisted. The sight of it caused Han Danzi's face to fill with a look of shock. You can actually affect demonic qi," he said hoarsely. "How? You're a cultivator cultivating heaven and earth power. That's different from demonic qi. They can't mix. How can you manipulate demonic qi?" He was thoroughly shaken, his first time seeing a cultivator manipulate demonic qi. As far as he was concerned, it was inconceivable and unbelievable. Most importantly, it was clear that Meng Hao's manipulation of the demonic qi was real, and not an illusion. It was in complete contrast to himself. Whereas his apparent manipulation of demonic qi was actually trickery, Meng Hao really was stirring all of the demonic qi in the entire world. Even as Han Danzi was feeling shaken, Meng Hao took a deep breath. He could sense a resonance between himself and this world. In the outside world, he was incapable of absorbing the power of heaven and earth. However, in this place, it was as if a hole had been opened up, and all the demonic qi was rushing into it without the slightest impediment. And yet it didn't cause any transformations within him whatsoever. Inside of him, it turned into pure power. It was not demonic qi, nor was it spiritual energy. It was a unique power that belonged only to Meng Hao. That power circulated about within him, filling him with an indescribably pleasurable sensation. A bizarre light shone in his eyes as he looked down at Han Danzi and the giant head floating there in midair. "Demon sealing, 8th hex," said Meng Hao slowly. It almost sounded as if he were issuing orders. The words echoed about like the peals of thunder. 4 words exploded like thunder, 4 words, spoken by Meng Hao. As the words sounded out like thunder, all of the demonic qi around Meng Hao began to coalesce together. In the blink of an eye, the enormous character for seal appeared directly in front of him. The character was fully 300 meters tall, and it absorbed more and more demonic qi as it shot down toward the ground. In this moment within the 8th anima, Meng Hao was the 9th generation demon sealer. The speed with which the character moved was indescribable. Han Danzi's face filled with disbelief as he felt an unprecedented pressure weighing down on him, along with a sense of deadly crisis. All of a sudden, he realized that Meng Hao was his archenemy. Or perhaps it could be said that he was the archenemy of all greater demons. Han Danzi began to pant, and suddenly he recalled a legend. According to legend, within the 9 mountains and seas, there are people who can cultivate the Tao and can also fuse with demons. No type of expulsion is effective on them. They call themselves demon sealers. The character seal has 2 meanings. One is to restrict, the other is to aid. 1. In Chinese, the character Chinese letter can mean to seal in the sense of sealing an envelope. It can also mean to cover or bestow. In Meng Hao's art of righteous bestowal, the bestow word is this same character. Han Danzi's mind trembled as the seal character formed of demonic qi descended. All of the demonic qi seemed to be affected, making it so that Han Danzi was incapable of dodging or evading. He could only try to fight back directly. A huge boom lifted up into the sky. Blood sprayed from Han Danzi's mouth as, in the blink of an eye, he was surrounded by glowing hex light. From a distance, the hex light looked like strands of silk, binding up Han Danzi. It sealed his life force, sealed his cultivation base, sealed all of him. It sealed him, and it sealed the enormous head. Shockingly, the light of the 8th hex also thoroughly enveloped the enormous head. From a distance, it looked as if there were some enormous net covering over it. The giant net was fused with the ground in the area and pulled down viciously. Blood oozed out of Han Danzi's mouth, and he trembled. Unable to control his body, he kneeled down onto the ground, his expression vicious. It sounded like he wanted to roar with rage, but was incapable of making a single sound come out of his throat. Beneath the power of the eighth hex's giant net, the head slowly stopped emerging out. In fact, it began to show signs of sinking back. Meng Hao hovered in midair, trembling slightly, his finger still pointing down at the ground. From the time he became a demon sealer until now, this was his first time, truly sealing a demon. The demonic chi in the area continued to rush toward him. He alone had shaken the world and used its power to push down a demon. Handanzi was pushed down closer toward the ground, his face pale, his eyes filled with frenzy and an unyielding look. The giant head sank back, and soon, half of its mouth was back in the other world. However, it was then that the greater demon in the world of the mirror suddenly looked up. Its gaze seemed to pierce out from the mirror into the outside world. A strange look appeared in its eyes, and its mouth twisted into a smile. Tai, it said. As the bizarre word echoed out, a change occurred to the giant head emerging from within the mirror world. The aura of death which had previously swirled around it suddenly seemed to fill with the power of life. Although it did not open its eyes, it did open its mouth. The voice which emerged was the exact same voice which had been heard moments ago. Tai. The sound turned into an attack which spread out in all directions, sweeping over everything. Heaven and earth filled with roaring, and countless fissures spread out everywhere. The net of the eighth hex that covered the head began to shatter into small pieces. In the blink of an eye, it was destroyed and dissipated. The eighth hex which suppressed Handanzi was also swept away, completely destroyed. The demonic chi in the world began to roar like exploding thunder. Up in midair, Meng Hao coughed up a mouthful of blood and his face went white. He staggered back several paces. "So you're a demon sealer," said Handanzi. A strange light appeared in his eyes and he lifted his head back to laugh, then shot up into the air. "Who cares about demon sealers? I'll kill you, take your blood, absorb your soul, and make a demon-sealing precious treasure." "It's just the will of heaven." Handanzi seemed overjoyed as he shot up into the air. Demonic chi surged toward Meng Hao, and at the same time the head began to emerge again. All of a sudden, a neck and 2 shoulders could be seen. "The will of heaven, huh?" said Meng Hao, stabilizing himself. He looked coldly at approaching Handanzi and the gigantic greater demon that he apparently couldn't prevent from emerging. "There was no enmity between us. Neither you absorbing the power of that demon, nor the prospect of bringing it back to life, have anything to do with me. What I want isn't you or that demon, but rather this entire place." A bizarre light shone in Meng Hao's eyes. The current situation now fit in perfectly with his requirements. There was nobody left, so he felt confident enough to take out the copper mirror. Even as Handanzi closed in, Meng Hao slapped his bag of holding with his right hand. Instantly, the copper mirror appeared, the same mysterious copper mirror that he had acquired back in the Reliance sect all those years ago, which had accompanied him all this time. It didn't look like anything special at all, and was even a bit rusted in places. It looked like a completely ordinary item. "A crappy mirror," laughed Handanzi. "Don't tell me that's supposed to be some kind of precious treasure or something." He stopped in place, looking as if he didn't care at all about Meng Hao and his mirror. However, inwardly, the fact that Meng Hao had retrieved this magical item in a critical moment left him worried in a way that was quite the opposite to the way he made it look. As soon as the copper mirror appeared, the mirror continent below suddenly trembled. Ripples spread out, looking almost like waves on the surface of the mirror-like continent. Within the world of the mirror, everything that was alive suddenly stopped moving. Even the head which was emerging from inside stopped in place. However, it was in this moment that the eyes began to twitch, as if they were struggling to open and awake. "What is that?" gasped Handanzi. He was just going to attempt to stop Meng Hao when Meng Hao pointed the mirror directly down toward the mirror continent. The 2 mirrors shone on each other, and anyone who could see them would be able to spot a majestic black hole inside each one. Each black hole seemed endless, as if it contained truths inside that no one would ever be able to understand. The great mirror land below began to rumble and shake. The ripples continued to spread out, thicker and more numerous. At the same time, the mirror Meng Hao held began to grow warm, as if it were thirsting for something, as if it wanted to consume the entire mirror continent below. It was then that the mirror continent, which Meng Hao could not even see the ends of, suddenly began to shrink. It grew smaller rapidly, accompanied by a roaring sound that lifted up into the sky. It shrank, and if you were able to stand in a position far, far above, you would see that the lands below shockingly, were actually shaped like a mirror, and as of this moment the mirror was shrinking down at a rapid rate. As the mirror continent shrank, it was possible to see that the shape of the mirror was absolutely identical to the copper mirror that Meng Hao held. Han Danzi's face fell. Even as he was about to charge at Meng Hao, his body began to be pulled back by the great mirror continent. His body was out of his own control, and he was incapable of nearing Meng Hao. Instead, a gravitational force pulled him down toward the lands below. At the same time, the eyes of the greater demon head that was emerging from the mirror land suddenly cracked open. An indistinct, growling voice echoed out, filled with ancientness. "You actually have the mountain and sea mirror." This chapter was sponsored by David Ma and Anonymous. Chapter 619, Night Awakens. The sound seemed to echo out from ancient times. In fact, as Meng Hao looked over, what he really saw was not a head with eyes opened, but rather a virtually dead greater demon. It was almost as if everything from before had been an illusion. However, the ground was still shaking and rapidly shrinking. That was no illusion. Meng Hao could see, and even detect with divine sense, that the mirror, which was the continent, had shrunk down to only several tens of thousands of meters wide. From his vantage point, it was now possible to see that the land was rapidly turning into an actual mirror. It included all of the lives and magical items on the battlefield. All of them shrank down to become exponentially smaller along with the mirror. The head of the greater demon could no longer emerge, but rather sank back down, taking Han Danzi with it. His face was filled with terror and astonishment as he tried every method possible to break free. All were useless. He screamed miserably, hopelessly as he looked down at himself. It was at this point that he realized that he was also sinking into the mirror. When his feet touched the land, they sank directly into the water-like surface until he was as far down as his ankles. "No," he cried out in alarm. "How can this be? This is impossible." He howled and struggled, but it did absolutely no good. Meng Hao trembled. The mirror was now incredibly hot, to the point where white steam was now pulsing off of his hand. He had no choice but to grip it with both hands. By now, Meng Hao could sense the indescribable gravitational force being exerted by the mirror. It wasn't targeting Han Danzi, but rather the entire mirror land. Don't tell me it wants to suck in the entire mirror land of the fourth plane of the demon immortal sect. Having reached this conclusion, Meng Hao began to pant, and his mouth was parched and dry. If that was really what was happening, then it would mean that he had gained a colossal amount of good fortune in the ancient demon immortal sect. Such good fortune would be simply unimaginable to anyone else, completely beyond anticipation or expectation. Meng Hao palpitated with eagerness as he clutched the copper mirror tightly in his hands and watched the mirror continent below shrinking. An unprecedentedly loud rumbling could be heard filling the entire world. Han Danzi let out a blood-curdling shriek. He was already sunk halfway down into the surface of the mirror. Next to him, the head of the greater demon had sunk back down to the point where its nose was covered. How could this be happening? This is impossible, impossible. Han Danzi had gone mad. His expression was one of terror. He shouted out toward Meng Hao, begging for mercy and help. However, because of the intense rumbling, his voice was virtually undetectable. Meng Hao didn't even notice it. The demonic qi in the area churned. The shrinking of the land was like the lifting of a veil, revealing something beneath. When Meng Hao looked down, he saw something that caused his mind to reel. There below was a gigantic brain. The brain seemed limitlessly huge, sleek and white, with black spots visible in various locations. There were also some areas where brightly colored lights flashed back and forth. Every flash of light seemed to contain countless images, almost like memories. The sight was completely shocking to Meng Hao. His breath came in ragged pants, and he glanced once again at the shrinking land. Suddenly, he recalled something Han Danzi had said. This mirror continent is placed on top of the brain of true spirit night. Meng Hao took a deep breath and looked down again at the boundless, colossally huge brain. Is this place really the head of true spirit night? If so, what exactly is that passageway? His scalp was numb and his body trembled as he looked around. The mirror land seemed to be in the final process of shrinking. It was now only about 30,000 meters wide, and looked almost exactly like the copper mirror he held, except much larger. Han Danzi was almost completely sunk into the surface of the mirror. His face was pale and he was no longer howling. Instead, he stared at Meng Hao with a venomous, insane look. As for the head of the greater demon, it had sunk down past the eyes. Only the top of its head remained, along with the three black horns, which emanated a bizarre glow. The entire world was shaking. 30,000 meters, 25,000 meter, 20,000 meters. By this point, sweat was pouring down Meng Hao's forehead. His entire body shook as he clutched at the copper mirror. Were it not for his incredible fleshly body, it might not have been possible to prevent the mirror from slipping out of his hands. And yet, even in the eighth anima, Meng Hao was incapable of holding on for very much longer. It was at this point that suddenly, out of nowhere, a sound could be heard. It was like a baby crying, and it seemed to be coming from the outside world, and yet, at the same time, seemed to be coming from inside, all around him. It started out somewhat weak, and then grew stronger and stronger. At the same time, Meng Hao's mind filled with a roaring. Simultaneously, the dancing flashes of electric light on the surface of the brain of true spirit knight suddenly increased by tenfold, as did the speed with which they moved. An aura of awakening suddenly covered over everything. Meng Hao's face twitched. "Ha ha ha, you're dead," cried Han Danzi. "You shook the seals of the three holy lands and thus have awoken true spirit night. When it awakens, it brings calamity." He began to laugh maniacally. Meanwhile, outside of the fourth plane, in the demon immortal sect, the ground was quaking and the mountains were shaking. Rumbling could be heard in all directions as huge cracks and fissures suddenly appeared to spread out across the surface of the land. The huge cracks and fissures, the massive rumbling, all of it made it seem as if the demon immortal sect was experiencing doomsday. Ruins toppled and dust flew up in all directions, covering everything and making it hazy. Off in the distance, the South Heaven cultivators fled in shock toward the demon immortal sect's exit gate past the first peak. They had no idea what was happening, but they could guess. Obviously, something incredible was happening in the fourth plane that was connected somehow to the goings-on. Everything grew dark and the sound of rumbling rose to the heavens. As the land was shattered, a boundless aura seeped out to flood the entire area. Rifts even began to appear in the air, one after another. A middle-aged man stood atop the fourth peak, wearing a long white robe. He looked around at everything that was happening, his expression complex. Occasionally, killing intent would fill him. Sometimes gentleness could be seen. This was Qi Jiusi. If it was anyone else who awoke night and caused the legacy of Lord Li to appear, I would be forced to kill him. Outsiders cannot acquire the legacy of Lord Li. But him. Qi Jiusi thought back to what he had experienced in ancient times when he had superimposed with Meng Hao. In the end, his father had recognized Meng Hao, acknowledged that they were father and son in that life. The killing intent in Qi Jiusi's eyes slowly dissipated, to be replaced by gentle warmth. If he was my father's son in that life, then that means he is my little brother. Maybe I can't acquire the legacy of Lord Li, but if he can, it's the will of heaven. Qi Jiusi sighed. As everything shook, and even more rifts appeared up in the sky above the demon immortal sect. Gradually, the shocking sight of the peaks of three inverted mountains became visible. As they appeared to descend, an incredible pressure could be felt. The entire demon immortal sect shook violently. The South Heaven cultivators were arriving at the exit gate past the first peak. In their shock, there were already quite a few who had chosen to use their demon spirit to leave. However, that would take time. As the world shook more and more violently, the sound of a wailing infant suddenly filled the air. It sounded as if there was a baby sleeping deep, deep under the ground, its eyes closed. But then, as it began to awaken, it started to cry. Once the sound could be heard, the destruction grew even more intense. By now, the three inverted mountains were visible by more than half. Meanwhile, back in the fourth plane, the great mirror continent had now shrunk down to only about 10,000 meters wide. Han Danzi was now completely submerged inside, gone. As for the head of the greater demon, only a tiny bit was left visible. The rest had sunk back down into the mirror. Meng Hao's face was pale, and his body was slowly moving forward. He was not moving of his own volition, but rather was being pulled by the copper mirror. Closer and closer. The mirror continent continued to shrink. 10,000 meters, 5,000 meters, 2,500 meters, 1,500 meters, 1,000 meters, 300 meters. The head of the greater demon had completely sunk back into the mirror. Back in the calm lands inside the mirror, that greater demon who split the heaven into its third continued to look up coldly at Meng Hao. Its gaze seemed eternal, and as Meng Hao looked at it, his mind trembled. However, there was no time to think deeply about the matter right now. As of now, he was only about 100 meters away from the 300-meter wide mirror. As he got closer, it continued to shrink. 150 meters, 100 meters, 30 meters, 25 meters, 15 meters, 5 meters, 3 meters. When the mirror land reached a size of 3 meters, suddenly, it began to distort. Meng Hao watched as it twisted into what looked like strands of silk that then shot toward his own copper mirror. The copper mirror seemed to consume them, bit by bit, until they were all sucked in. Within the space of only a few breaths, the entire continental mirror was sucked in by Meng Hao's copper mirror. It acted almost like a tonic for the mirror. After the consumption occurred, the copper mirror experienced an unprecedented transformation. All of the bits of rust on its surface completely disappeared. The ancient decorative patterns on its surface grew deeper and more profound. Pulses of light could be seen circulating within, and murmuring sounds could be heard like the singing of immortals. Meng Hao's mind trembled. As he looked closer at the mirror, he saw multiple cracks on its surface. They intersected with each other to form 9 areas. Right now, in the upper left part of the mirror, there was an area that looked completely different from the others. It actually looked like the surface of a mirror. It glowed with the light of magical items, and within, a vortex could be seen, slowly rotating. That vortex seemed to contain the secret of the origin of the world. Within the vortex, shockingly, was the ancient battlefield. At the same time, the fourth plane now had no land left in it at all. Instead, the brain was fully revealed. The electric light danced about on its surface 1,000-fold more than before. A shocking sound could be heard that far exceeded the wailing of before. Night had been provoked into awakening. This chapter was sponsored by Devry Blake, Lam Otis, Tiago Sturmer Dadex, and Stefan from Sweden. Chapter 620, Night's Head. By now, 10,000 times as many arcs of electric light were dancing back and forth on the brain of true spirit Night. At the same time, the brain began to twitch. Bursting howls could be heard echoing in from outside, howls that shook the mind. Meng Hao's face flickered as an intense sensation of grave crisis appeared inside of him. He could sense terrifying fluctuations, and an aura that seemed capable of destroying him in a single explosive burst. Numbness washed over his scalp as, without hesitation, he put the copper mirror away and then flew at the highest speed possible toward the exit passage. The passage had once seemed to be a deep pit, but because of the aura of awakening night, it had changed dramatically. It was moving, wriggling, as if the passageway was actually some part of the body of true spirit Night. Meng Hao's face fell, and he pushed himself to go even faster. He was now at the pinnacle of the 8th anima, and he moved even faster than lightning as he shot into the passageway. In the blink of an eye, he was speeding along inside. Roar! A shocking roar echoed out from both below and above. Everything in the demon immortal sect shook violently and began to fall into pieces. The destruction was clearly visible to Meng Hao. He could see it with his own eyes, because the walls that surrounded him seemed to be covered with a partially transparent filament. Through that, Meng Hao could see the lands cracking and shattering by layers, then falling downward. As he looked back through pit-like passageway, Meng Hao suddenly realized that it looked more like a tube. It was a tube that ran to the brain of true spirit Night, and he was right in the middle of that tube, moving with unprecedented, maddening speed. As he sped along, he began to pant. That was because he was astonished to find that the tube he was traveling through was actually lifting up into the air. It's not just this passageway that's lifting up into the air. Actually, this passageway is part of the body of true spirit Night. When it moves, it will appear from within the land. Meng Hao's mind trembled as he looked through the semi-transparent walls of the passageway to see the land collapsed everywhere. He could also feel the sensation of the passageway moving upward. After more than 10 breaths of time passed, a blinding white light filled Meng Hao's vision. A huge roar filled the passageway he was in as it was completely lifted up from the ground until it was in midair above the demon immortal sect. By this point, Meng Hao had traversed roughly 70% of the passageway, placing him 30% of the distance away from the exit. The passageway was now trembling violently, and Meng Hao's face was pale white. Through the semi-transparent walls, he could see that outside. Fissures covered all of the lands of the demon immortal sect. Most of the various areas of the sect were completely collapsed. In fact, most of the land seemed to be caving in, as if some enormous creature were rising up. Rocks tumbled down the sides of the 7 mountain peaks, as if even they would not be able to survive this incredible catastrophe. The first to collapse was the 3rd peak. As the lands around it collapsed and caved in, the mountain peak began to slant to the side and sink. However, as he looked at it, Meng Hao got the strange feeling that the third peak was not actually collapsing. Actually, there appeared to be some incredible force causing it to tilt to the side. He couldn't quite be sure, but the sensation was intense. Then, even as the semi-transparent passageway vibrated rapidly, Meng Hao suddenly saw something that he would never be able to forget. He saw an incredibly large head. It was so large that it was impossible to estimate exactly how large it was, and only half of it was visible. It looked like a human head, except it had no hair, and was instead completely covered with pitch-black scales. Shockingly, this head seemed to encompass all of the lands of the demon immortal sect. Meng Hao's scalp went numb, and his mouth was completely dry. He was thoroughly incapable of determining how large this head was. He also saw that the semi-transparent passageway he was in was actually an enormous antenna attached to the top of the head. It was a tube-like antenna, apparently used for breathing. What caused Meng Hao's mind to tremble with even more disbelief was that the previously tilting and toppling third peak, actually, had stopped after reaching a certain angle and was no longer falling. That was because the third peak was not actually part of the land at all. It was connected to the head. More accurately, the third peak was actually an enormous horn growing out from the top of the head. This is true spirit night, thought Meng Hao, staring with wide eyes. He wasn't the only one seeing this. The other South Heaven cultivators who were congregated outside of the first peak watched on with pale faces. At the same time, the location where they stood began to collapse. A huge hole appeared, a passageway out to the starry sky that everyone unhesitatingly entered. As they flew into the passageway, their bodies began to emit a white light. The light seemed to be separating them from the ancient demon immortal sect. Their bodies began to grow transparent. Apparently, it wouldn't be long before they completely disappeared. At the same time, bands of starlight descended from all directions, transforming into a river of stars. The appearance of the river of stars indicated that the return to South Heaven had begun. It was time to leave the good fortune of the demon immortal sect. Meng Hao, cried Su Qing inwardly. She bit down her lip as the soft light began to envelop her. Gradually she grew transparent, but her anxious eyes were focused in the direction of Meng Hao back in the demon immortal sect. Similarly anxious was Fang Yu. Her hands were clenched into fists as she watched the demon immortal sect collapsing. Hurry up, Meng Hao, get out of there. As for the other South Heaven cultivators, all of them were filled with complex emotions. They were overwhelmed with astonishment at the sudden drastic turn of events in the ancient demon immortal sect. At the same time, they were also filled with unspeakable, conflicting thoughts regarding Meng Hao. They wanted Meng Hao dead so that their debts would be absolved. However, were it not for Meng Hao's actions just now, all of them would be dead. That was a kindness on his part. Various thoughts filled them as they watched on silently. Meng Hao was scared out of his mind. As far as he could tell, he had really set something epic into motion. All I did was pull out a crappy mirror, right? He thought, clenching his jaw. He continued to speed along as fast as possible toward the exit of the semi-transparent passageway. However, it was at this point that, surrounded by the collapsing lands, the head of true spirit knight slowly began to lift up. A reverberating wail even more shocking than before echoed out in all directions. The second peak, the fourth peak, the first peak, the fifth peak. All shook violently and rose up into the air. Countless stones and boulders fell down as four shocking horns were revealed. The antenna undulated, and at the same time the exit appeared just up ahead of Meng Hao, even as he was about to break free. Knight, whose head was now half emerged from the collapsing lands, suddenly inhaled. The breath caused an enormous sucking force to rush through the semi-transparent passageway. Meng Hao was completely incapable of controlling his body. His eyes went wide as he felt himself being sucked in. Filled with shock, he unleashed the full power of his cultivation base. His right hand reached out the side and grabbed hold of a vine. How could Meng Hao not see that these vines were actually like hairs that existed within true spirit knight's antenna? As soon as he grabbed a hold of it, he stopped moving. However, only a moment later, the vine snapped. Meng Hao's eyes went wide as he was once again sucked back. All of these things happened in only the space of 10 or so breaths. To Meng Hao, though, it seemed like an eternity. If this is the breathing of true spirit night, he thought, breathing involves inhaling and exhaling. If this is the inhaling, then it must be followed by exhaling. Time to gamble. With that, his eyes filled with determination. There was little else he could do now except gamble. He continued to grab onto vines and continued to employ the full power of his cultivation base to try to slow his movement. 10 breaths of time passed. Beneath him, Meng Hao could see the end of the passageway, and once again, the brain of true spirit night. However, it was at this point that the inhaling ended. It was then followed by an intense, explosive force in the opposite direction. Meng Hao's eyes glittered. Roaring filled his body and blood sprayed from his mouth. Underneath the power of the force, he shot upward. His eyes filled with madness and his cultivation base exploded, adding even more speed. The entire process didn't even take 10 breaths of time. Meng Hao's body rumbled as he suddenly shot directly out from within the antenna. By the time he flew out, the lands of the demon immortal sect were completely collapsed and destroyed. The 6th peak and the 7th peak shook violently. Beneath them was revealed a head that was as large as more than half the lands of the demon immortal sect. It had human features but was covered with pitch-black scales. It had 7 enormous horns and a long antenna, the end of which glowed with a green light. Its eyes were half open, and inside could be seen the blankness of awakening. There was also a shocking, indescribable energy pulsating off of its body. This was true spirit night. It had 7 horns that could form mountains, and even though the head was only half emerged, its shocking aura was such that anyone who looked at it couldn't help but feel their mind tremble. Meng Hao shot back at top speed. He himself was nothing in comparison to true spirit night. He couldn't help but think back to the only thing which could possibly compare in size to true spirit night, and that was Patriarch Reliance, with the state of Zhao on his back. All I did was take out a crappy mirror. Could that really stimulate this thing into awakening? Sweat poured down Meng Hao's forehead as he shot toward the location of the other South Heaven cultivators, all of whom were staring in astonishment at true spirit night. Their minds were filled with roaring, and they were incapable of even speaking half a sentence. At the same time, they were on the verge of becoming completely transparent, making them appear like shadows. Meng Hao flew as fast as he could, using all of the power of his cultivation base, the green smoke, the black moon. However, almost the same moment in which he reached the exit behind him, true spirit night uttered the first sound that was not a wail. Night. As the voice of true spirit night echoed out, the cultivators from South Heaven were surrounded by starlight. Countless motes and fragments mixed with the starlight, covering everything and transforming it into a river of stars. The river of stars, filled with countless motes of light, gathered momentum as it unfurled, sweeping up all of the cultivators to return them to South Heaven. After all, they had been brought here by the river of stars, so it was natural they would be taken away the same way. Seeing the river of stars, everyone felt more relaxed, though they wished it would form faster. With things spiraling out of control, they wanted to leave immediately. As of now, this was not the 4th plane of the ancient demon immortal sect. This was the hitherto unknown 5th plane. The 5th plane, the awakening of true spirit night. As true spirit night's voice echoed out, the land and sky in all directions twisted and ghost images seemed to appear. The entire world seemed to revert to ancient times. Countless figures flew about and everything flourished. But then sometimes everything would become ruins, filled with corpses. And then it would simply be night, head raised, the 7 peaks turned into horns. Ghost images flickered over the entire world. True spirit night had now thoroughly lifted up its head from within the land. When true spirit night slept, the world was a dream. When true spirit night awoke, calamity came to heaven and earth. Meng Hao panted, and the South Heaven cultivators watched in alarm. Although the bodies of the crowd were half transparent, they couldn't help but back up nervously and wish fervently that they could teleport away as soon as possible. With an incredible roar, the colossal head of true spirit night suddenly spoke, its voice indistinct. "Give my precious mirror back to me." The voice echoed, causing Meng Hao's mind to tremble as he coughed up blood. The South Heaven cultivators' minds felt as if they were being exploded by lightning. The sound of the voice was deafening. A moment later, the South Heaven cultivators all looked over at Meng Hao. One by one they began to express their astonishment. What treasure did Meng Hao take? Don't tell me he stole a precious treasure from that demon beast, causing it to awaken. Precious mirror, could it be? Could it be that it's talking about the continental mirror we saw in the 4th plane? As their voices rang out, their eyes began to fill with shock and amazement, as well as intense jealousy. "Take out the continental mirror and return it to me," said true spirit night. This time its voice was clearer. As it spoke, massive amounts of lightning began to rise up around the 7 mountain peaks. Before Meng Hao could speak, the group from South Heaven began to pant as they understood the meaning of Knight's words. The continental mirror of the fourth plane, which contained innumerable precious treasures, had actually been taken away by Meng Hao. The eyes of virtually all of the South Heaven cultivators instantly went red. Even Fang Yu was breathing heavily and looking at Meng Hao with an expression of disbelief. Wang Lihai, Han Bei, Li Shiki, and the others all appeared to be in complete disbelief, their minds shaken to the extreme. They couldn't even begin to imagine how Meng Hao had managed to take away the continental mirror. The Jai clan members' eyes were wide. The cultivators from the northern reaches and the southern domain were panting. Everyone was completely flabbergasted by this new information. Su Qing's face was also filled with disbelief. She looked at Meng Hao, and then a smile broke out on her face. Meng Hao frowned. Without saying a single word, he shot out at full speed. His body was already growing transparent, and he could sense the power of teleportation. At the same time, the river of stars was nearly materialized, seemingly endless and filled with motes of light. It swept through the void, picking up the South Heaven cultivators including Meng Hao, then spun and shot off into the distance. As Meng Hao and the others were swept up by the river of stars, the eyes of True Spirit Knight suddenly opened completely. Any blankness was wiped away, replaced with awareness. True Spirit Knight was now fully awake. The instant of complete awakening, True Spirit Knight let out a roar that caused the entire world and void to cease moving. Even the river of stars trembled and stopped. Meng Hao's face fell, and the expressions of the South Heaven cultivators were that of complete astonishment. Suddenly, the land below rumbled and disintegrated as a gigantic arm slowly rose. Black and covered with scales with only 4 fingers, it left behind a gigantic pit as it rose. It stretched impossibly long, its palm so large it seemed to cover the sky. The arm stretched out, snatching toward the river of stars. "Get back here," said True Spirit Knight, its voice rumbling into the heavens. Meng Hao's body flew out of his control, pulled from the river of stars toward the giant hand. In the blink of an eye, he stood on the giant hand. Meng Hao's face was pale, his eyes sharp. Now that Meng Hao had left the river of stars, it trembled and slowly began to move again. The South Heaven cultivators moved off into the distance. Meng Hao, Su Qing's face fell, and she struggled to fly out, unable to leave the river of stars. Fang Yu's face also showed anxiety. Most of the others seemed to be rejoicing in his misfortune. "He's dead. That demon beast specifically kept him behind. He's definitely going to die. He stole that thing's precious treasure. How could it possibly let him leave?" The cultivators continued to watch as they moved off into the distance. True Spirit Knight retracted its palm, bringing Meng Hao directly before it. Pale, he stood on the palm, looking up at the colossal head and True Spirit Knight's eyes. Meng Hao's right hand rested on his bag of holding, a cold glow in his eyes. He knew he was no match for True Spirit Knight. Even a single breath could extinguish his life force. However, until death arrived, Meng Hao would fight. "You have no aura upon you which I find familiar," said True Spirit Knight, looking over Meng Hao. Its right hand began to close into a fist. As it did, indescribable pressure inundated Meng Hao. Cracking sounds echoed and blood sprayed from his mouth. His body seemed to be collapsing. Even his internal organs were on the verge of exploding. However, not even a scrap of fear remained in Meng Hao's eyes. Instead, madness burned inside, transforming into ferocity. Finally, he took a deep breath, preparing to pull out the copper mirror. However, at this moment, a white-robed figure suddenly appeared. He strode forward. One moment he was far off, the next he stood before Meng Hao. His back to Meng Hao, he stood protectively, facing True Spirit Knight. White-robed with long dark gray hair, he was indescribably ancient. This was Qi Jiusi. "You may not harm him," said Qi Jiusi calmly, staring up at True Spirit Knight, his voice filled with incredible power. The energy caused heaven and earth to flicker with different colors, as if capable of fighting back against True Spirit Knight. True Spirit Knight looked at Qi Jiusi. "I've awakened," it said, its voice a drone. "There must be extermination of life." "He is a son approved by my father," said Qi Jiusi quietly. Behind him, a tremor ran through Meng Hao. As he looked at Qi Jiusi, the warmth between him and Qi Yunhai in the second plane suddenly filled his heart. "That was a dream," said True Spirit Knight, its voice cold. "Since my father approved of him, it doesn't matter whether it was an illusion or not," said Qi Jiusi slowly, a mysterious light flickering through his eyes. "He is my little brother. With me here, nothing in existence, not even you, can harm him in the slightest bit or even dare to try." As he spoke, an indescribable aura rose up. Meng Hao stood there silently, looking at Qi Jiuxi's back. The hand that gripped his bag of holding slowly relaxed. I'll hand over the continental mirror," said Meng Hao with a soft sigh. But as the words left his mouth, Qi Jiuxi turned and gave Meng Hao a profound look. This was the first time Meng Hao had ever seen Qi Jiuxi's face. He almost thought he was looking at Qi Yunhai, gasping in shock at the familiar features. But he saw immediately, it was definitely not Qi Yunhai. "You don't need to hand it over," said Qi Jiuxi. Moments ago he had watched Meng Hao show no fear in the face of death, yet now he was willing to surrender the continental mirror. Qi Jiuxi understood, and gentleness appeared in his eyes. "Since you took it, you were destined for such good fortune. Besides, the awakening of true spirit night doesn't mean complete catastrophe." Qi Jiuxi gazed at Meng Hao. "Do you trust me?" Meng Hao looked at Qi Jiuxi, at the features which so much resembled Qi Yunhai. Without hesitation he replied, "I trust you." In the past, Lord Li laid down orders that whoever awakened true spirit night would be given two options. With another deep look at Meng Hao, Qi Jiuxi turned back to true spirit night. "Night, he is my little brother, so I'll make the decision for him. He will choose the second path." Night was silent, its expression complex. Finally, its gaze fell on Meng Hao. Slowly, it began to explain. "Lord Li ordered that whichever life form wakes me up will be given two options. First option, return the continental mirror to me, and I will continue to sleep. Second option, do not return the mirror and prepare yourself to acquire the qualifications to receive Lord Li's legacy. Walk the 3 mountains, pass through the holy lands, ascend to the 4th heaven, acquire the legacy of Lord Li. If you fail, then you will stay behind as a guest in my dream." Its voice echoed to the South Heaven cultivators in the River of Stars. When they heard the true spirit's words, they gaped in shock. The Jai clan members and cultivators from the northern reaches especially looked back at the distant demon immortal sect, their eyes wide with disbelief, jealousy, and madness. Just what kind of good fortune is this? Damn it, how is this possible? That's not a catastrophe. Isn't there supposed to be a catastrophe? Is Meng Hao supposed to be exterminated? How could such good luck as this appear? Lord Li's legacy. Seriously, the legacy of Lord Li. It was so overbearing before, like it could destroy everything. How could things turn around and become such good fortune? The legacy of Lord Li. I can't accept this. This chapter was sponsored by Joachim Trailvik. Chapter 622, 3 Mountains, 9 Bows. The South Heaven cultivators watched with wide, disbelieving eyes, their hearts filled with jealousy that rippled into avarice. Few were happy to see Meng Hao's good fortune. Most were jealous to the point of hatred. Damn it, why does it have to be him? In the second plane, he was an elite apprentice. In the third plane, he stole away all our treasures. In the fourth plane, he acquired that precious treasure, the continental mirror. And now here in the fifth plane, he's acquired the qualifications for the legacy of Lord Li. Why does it have to be this way? By what right of virtue or ability does he fall into such good luck? I can't stand for this. Worst of all is that we still owe him a huge debt. I myself owe 800,000 spirit stones. I owe him 1 million spirit stones. Damn it, why can't he just die here? Other than Su Qing, Fang Yu, and few others, all the cultivators from South Heaven gnashed their teeth, their jealousy of Meng Hao having risen to the pinnacle. "He'll be going back to the lands of South Heaven eventually," said Jai Mingkong suddenly, his eyes flashing. As soon as he spoke, the eyes of the others began to flash. "That's right. He will be back in South Heaven eventually. And it doesn't matter what he acquired, we will still have to report everything that happened when we get back to our sects and clans. Look, all he did was acquire qualifications to get Lord Li's legacy. As to whether or not he will actually acquire the legacy remains unknown." As the South Heaven cultivators spoke among themselves, the River of Stars swept off into the distance. Gradually, they lost consciousness, slipping into slumber as they had when they arrived. The River of Stars floated back to the lands of South Heaven. Meanwhile, back in the demon immortal sect, Meng Hao stood on the palm of true spirit night as it slowly lifted him up into the sky. Qi Jiuxi also stood on night's palm, looking at Meng Hao with an encouraging expression. "This is your opportunity. As for how far you can get, that will depend on your personal good fortune." With that, he flicked his sleeve and then stepped out and disappeared into midair. Meng Hao's heart shook. He could never have imagined acquiring qualifications to try for Lord Li's legacy. He panted as the enormous palm lifted him skyward. Then, 3 inverted mountains appeared before him. These were the 3 greater demon mountains. It was at this point that Knight's voice rumbled out. The first stage of the legacy is the approval of the 7 peaks. You have already passed that stage. The second stage is to awaken me. You already passed that stage too. The third stage involves bowing 9 times to the 3 mountains. If you acquire the approval of all 3 mountains, then you can break through to the second heaven. For Jiuxi's sake, I will remind you, this stage can only be passed if you are destined to do so. Destined? Thought Meng Hao, looking at the 3 inverted mountains up in the air. After a moment of silence, he closed his eyes, then opened them again. They shone with a brilliant light. The first mountain was the frost-soiled demon mountain. Frozen over and filled with chaos, it was impossible to see wholly. However, Meng Hao could sense the freezing pressure emanating from it. This mountain seemed to be the coldest thing in heaven and earth, something even flames could do nothing to melt. It was as if any other freezing cold thing in the world wouldn't even dare to call itself cold while standing before this mountain. Looked at closely, the decorations and patterns within the ice seemed to contain entire worlds. Utterly bizarre. On the mountain was a towering altar with a throne. Seated within was a statue whose features were unclear, its right hand raised to the air where an ice flame had once burned. Meng Hao panted. He shifted his gaze to the next mountain. The second mountain was completely crimson, as if overflowing with fresh blood. An indescribable killing intent seemed to fill it, born from uncountable lives buried within. The overflow of blood had turned the mountain red. Killing intent circulated around, to the extent that even a single glance would cause one's mind to fill with a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. There was also an altar on this mountain, upon which could be seen a blood-colored throne. A figure sat on this throne, its right hand raised up. As soon as Meng Hao saw the figure, his mind trembled. A shocking, similar scene flashed before him. This is... Meng Hao's breath came in ragged pants. After a moment his eyes flickered as he suppressed his thoughts, then looked at the third mountain. Upon this mountain flames raged, dim yet seemingly incapable of burning out. Ghost images sprang up in the mind, as if countless volcanoes existed, making it impossible to tell which was real and which was false. Eventually, the image of countless withered figures could be seen on the surface of the volcanic mountain. They looked like evil spirits, emitting noiseless howls as they climbed, struggling amongst each other to be the first to reach the peak of the mountain, and then throw themselves into the pit of fire there. There was no altar, no throne, no figure. This third mountain was completely different than the other 2. 3 mountains, 3 greater demons of heaven and earth. Of course, the 3 greater demons had long since perished, but even Lord Li could not have made their essences fade. Therefore, the 3 mountains existed as before. Panting, Meng Hao gazed once more at the frost-soiled demon mountain. He clasped his hands and bowed deeply. First bow. I am connected by destiny to Han Shan, he said. I received his immortal sword and his bronze flagon. Therefore, I should bow first to the frost-soiled demon mountain. As his words rang out, the frost-soiled demon mountain suddenly trembled. Cracking sounds echoed from the mountain. Originally, ice spread across it, a power of sealing. But as Meng Hao bowed for the first time, that ice began to crack and split. More fissures spread, creating a roar that rose to the heavens as Meng Hao straightened. Down below, Qi Jiuxi stood on True Spirit Knight's head on the 4th peak. A strange light shone in his eyes. Even True Spirit Knight's eyes glittered. His first bow stirred transformations in the frost-soiled demon mountain. He truly is connected to the mountain by destiny. However, how strong that destiny is remains to be seen. Can he ignite the demon fire to illuminate the third heaven? Meng Hao looked up at the frost-soiled demon mountain, then took a deep breath. He clasped hands and bowed again. My earth-type totem is formed from frost soil. In the end, I created a frost soil nascent soul. This kindness or destiny leads me to bow again to the demon mountain. Second bow. Boom. As his voice rang out, a huge rumbling came from the frost-soiled demon mountain. More cracks appeared in the layers of ice. The cracks formed into something that looked like a face, an old man's, filled with ancientness, looking at Meng Hao. It seemed to see all of Meng Hao's past and future at a glance. At the same time, something changed about the figure seated in the throne on the altar. The previously empty spot in its right hand suddenly flickered as blue sparks appeared. It looked as if a flame wished to ignite there. When he saw this, Qi Jiuxi's eyes shone even brighter. As for true spirit knight, it said nothing, but a strange glow could be seen in its eyes. Meng Hao looked up at the old man's face in the ice. He clasped his hands and bowed again, determination burning in his eyes. I have an agreement with Senior Hanshan. One day, when my cultivation base is up to the task, I will return to the realm of the bridge ruins to rescue him. That agreement is destiny between myself and Senior Hanshan. It is also destiny between myself and the frost-soiled demon mountain. Today, I repeat the same oath as before. 1. Hanshan was the immortal Meng Hao met in the realm of the bridge ruins. In chapter 474, Meng Hao vowed to rescue him. Demon Mountain, please bear witness. This bow is evidence of the determination of Meng Hao of the junior generation. Not even the slightest sound came from the frost-soiled demon mountain. It seemed unresponsive to Meng Hao's third bow. Meng Hao felt his heart pounding. He knew he had tried to pull a fast one with it. Yet suddenly, "Agreed," said an ancient voice. It echoed from the frost-soiled demon mountain, as if from time's depths. As the voice spread, it carried endless coldness that distorted the world. The old man's face spoke. It gazed deeply at Meng Hao, then began to blur. Cracking sounds echoed as the cracks forming the face spread. They created a huge rift from mountain peak to base, a massive scar stretching across the entirety. The mark stretched to the altar and the figure on the throne. A bang sounded. The blue sparks dancing above its right hand suddenly formed together, transforming into a blue flame. As soon as the flame appeared, it illuminated the face of the figure. That face was exactly the same in all respects as Hanshan's. The flame roared, casting 3 rays of light skyward. Gradually, by the light of the flame, 2 shocking, enormous objects became visible in the sky. They floated high, more majestic and shocking than the 3 greater demon mountains. A shocking, indescribable aura surrounded those 2 objects. Meng Hao's mind trembled. He closed his eyes to calm himself, then opened them to look at the second mountain, the blood-colored demon mountain. He clasped hands, looked at the blood demon mountain and bowed. I'm not sure if this mountain has anything to do with the ancient Temple of Doom. That is why I bow now. If destiny exists, I implore the mountain to respond. This was his 4th bow in total, and his first toward the blood demon mountain. Note from Urgen. Yesterday was the funeral procession for my grandfather. According to tradition, tomorrow is the 3rd day after burial, the time to revisit the grave. I'll try to post as many chapters as possible today, but tomorrow I definitely won't be able to post 2 chapters. I'll only post 1. Thank you for your concern, everyone. Thank you. I'm fine. I just have a sore on my tongue which makes it difficult to eat. I don't want to think about the past. Note from Deathblade. Urgen's release schedule from so long ago doesn't affect mine. Usually his post-chapter messages aren't very meaningful, but this one was, so I figured I would share it. This chapter was sponsored by Emmanuel Martinez, Joachim Trailvik, Shirley Enns, and Emmanuel Martinez. Chapter 623, Sky 10, Meng Hao 7. The Crimson Blood Demon Mountain was originally sealed as quietly as death. However, after Meng Hao's bow, an aura spread from the throne, filling the mountain with a bloody glow that shone skyward, accompanied by an incredible rumbling sound. Even as Meng Hao's heart trembled, his eyes shone with strange light. Earlier, he had suspected the Blood Demon Mountain was connected to the Blood Immortal Mask. After all, the figure on the throne resembled the one he'd seen in the Blood Immortal Legacy tournament years ago. Most shocked of all was True Spirit Knight. It looked up, eyes filled with lightning, its expression disbelief. The fact that Meng Hao could acquire the approval of the frost-soiled Demon Mountain was shocking enough. But now, it was obvious he had a connection to the Blood Demon Mountain. The reaction caused True Spirit Knight's mind to involuntarily tremble. 3 portions of light from the frost soil, 1 portion from the blood demon. Together, that is 4 portions. Could it be that he really is the person Lord Li has been waiting for? If he is, then why can't I sense anything familiar about him? He has no aura I recognize, which doesn't match Lord Li's requirements. That was why I didn't grant him qualifications initially. Knight's eyes glittered as it looked at Meng Hao. It could clearly examine his person, but no matter how deeply it probed, Meng Hao remained mysterious. Are you, or are you not that person? Thought Knight. Regardless of whether you are or not, bowing 9 times to the 3 mountains is not a simple matter. He still does not have enough approval. The approval in the beginning is only the first step. The approval of a demon mountain can give rise to 3 portions of light. The path to the 3rd heaven depends on the approval of all 3 demon mountains. 3 to 9 portions of light make it possible for that path to appear. However, The path that appears with 3 portions of light is ordinary. Failure on that path will lead to the revoking of the qualifications. Only the path of 6 portions gives the participant 3 chances at the legacy, once every 500 years. As for the path of 9 portions of light, that is the legendary Great Circle. When it appears, failure still is followed by 9 more chances, like a blessing from above. The path of 9 portions is also called one step to immortality. If that person is already an immortal, their cultivation base can rise up to another realm. If they are not immortal, they can achieve immortal ascension. I must see exactly how many portions of light this fellow will acquire. Knight's eyes glittered as it looked at Meng Hao. In contrast to true spirit Knight, Qi Jiuxi's thoughts were not so complex. He watched with an admiring smile, hoping Meng Hao would acquire as much light as possible. Meng Hao took a deep breath as he looked at the quaking blood demon mountain. Then he clasped hands and bowed for the 5th time. At the same time, it was his second bow to the blood demon mountain. Junior is connected by destiny to the ancient temple of doom. I formed a blood-violet nascent soul. I realized that a boundless will of life exists within blood. Therefore, I bow to you, senior demon mountain. Meng Hao's bow was deep as he spoke these words. Instantly, roars erupted from the blood demon mountain. Bloody beams rose, interlocking to form a blood-colored demon flower. As soon as the flower appeared, a boundless radiance shone out. Crimson sparks suddenly appeared in the figure's right hand. This was the 5th portion of light. 2 demon mountains, 5 portions of light. The scene above grew clearer. Now, 2 enormous land masses were visible, floating far, far up above. Each floated matchlessly majestic, like 2 holy lands. They were high, high up, as if they were looking down upon the entire world. They really were holy lands. It didn't matter if you were speaking of the demon immortal sect or the 9th mountain, and sea as a whole. The Jai clan and the Fang clan holy lands were secondary only to the palace of Lord Li himself. Both then and now, they were illustrious and famous throughout the 9th mountain and sea, enormous masses that spanned the ages. 5 portions of light filled heaven and earth, yet suddenly the 5th portion flickered again. Next, something happened that exceeded even the imaginations of true spirit Knight and Qi Jiuxi. As the sparks appeared on the figure's hand, its eyes suddenly shone with bizarre light. It stared at Meng Hao, then slowly raised its left hand, as if asking for something. Meng Hao's mind shook, and he reached into his bag of holding. Immediately, the blood immortal mask appeared in his hand. As soon as Meng Hao took out the blood immortal mask, the figure slowly withdrew its hand. A voice suddenly echoed from countless years past. "Put on my mask." Meng Hao's eyes glittered as he placed the blood immortal mask on his face. Boom! Redness instantly spread out to cover Meng Hao's entire body. His hair became red, his robe turned red, and in the blink of an eye, his entire body was surrounded by bands of blood-colored light. It looked almost like a sea of blood was raging around him. In this instant, Meng Hao was the incarnation of the blood immortal. Behind him, an image slowly came into being. An enormous throne was visible, seated upon which was a woman whose face could not be seen. Her hair swirled around her, and she seemed to be gazing off into the distance. After the image appeared, the figure on the blood demon mountain trembled. Roars erupted from within, and a blazing tongue of demon fire ignited, instantly illuminating more sky above. The entire sky was filled with the light of 5 portions of light, and now, close to 6 portions illuminated it even further. Within the light, an illusory staircase appeared, leading upward to the 2 holy lands and the 3rd heaven. True Spirit Knight gasped. He actually has destiny connecting him to the blood demon. Its face showed disbelief. It could scarcely believe that Meng Hao would have destiny connected to both the Frost Soil Demon Mountain and the Blood Demon Mountain. It was really shocking good fortune. True Spirit Knight looked at Meng Hao, its mind spinning. The Demon Mountains lift the seal. They have spoken of their own volition, which only happens when destiny is present. Since such destiny has clearly reached the necessary level, Meng Hao is none other than a successor of the Blood Demon. He formed a Blood Demon divine clone, has a treasure made of the skin of the Blood Demon, and has even formed what is essentially a demon nascent soul. Is this person a cultivator or a greater demon of my generation? Furthermore, he hasn't even performed the 6th bow, and yet the 6th portion of light has almost fully appeared already. Meng Hao clasped hands to perform his 6th bow, the 3rd to the Blood Demon Mountain. The kindness of the blood immortal legacy, the kindness of the blood mastiff in the way it escorted me. Junior will never forget these things for the rest of his life. Once again, Senior, I bow to you, the essence of the mountain. After he bowed, the mountain rumbled. An endless echo came, with an ancient voice that slowly spoke from within the blood demon mountain. Agreed, said the voice, a single word. As soon as it spoke, demon fire soared. This represented the blood demon mountain's complete approval of Meng Hao. At the same time, light shone up into the sky. This was no longer 6 portions of light, but 7 portions. The sky had room for a total of 10 portions, and now Meng Hao occupied 7. The 7 portions of light illuminated the majority of the boundless sky. The 2 holy lands were now even clearer. The restrictive spells that had sealed them began to appear, along with countless vines hanging downward. They looked as if they had been in confinement for far, far too long, and were finally being revealed at long last. An unsightly expression appeared on the face of true spirit Knight, and complex feelings arose in its heart. It knew that it was incapable of doing anything to revoke the qualifications of this person. Once 6 portions of light were revealed, a minimum of 3 chances were guaranteed. Even if Meng Hao completely failed now, Knight was incapable of harming him in the slightest, let alone demand the Continental Mirror be returned. As long as Meng Hao had the qualifications, it was incapable of doing anything to him. It could only watch on helplessly as Meng Hao proceeded onward at will. 3 mountains, 9 bows. Already 6 bows have been performed. The final 3 bows are for the Withering Flame Demon Mountain. That is the most difficult mountain of all. Even if he already has 7 portions of light, he still cannot achieve 9 total. Knight's eyes flickered as it looked at Meng Hao. Kijiusi also looked at Meng Hao, a thoughtful expression in his eyes. Meng Hao closed his eyes and calmed his heart. Then he looked up toward the last of the demon mountains. This was the mountain of raging flame, with a pit of fire at its peak that countless withered figures struggled to enter. It almost seemed to be a location of reincarnation. By leaping into the pit, they could release themselves from worldly cares, find their true bodies, then leave and be reborn anew. However, what Meng Hao saw was that every person who leaped into the fiery pit would once again be born as a withered figure, who would then again begin to climb. It seemed to be an endless cycle. The more he watched, the more he realized that this was reincarnation. Actually, this mountain's true name was Reincarnation Demon Mountain. As for the name Withering Flame, it fit with its appearance, but not the meaning of the mountain. Of course, the greater demon which had given rise to this mountain had a technique called the Withering Flame Demon Magic True Self Tao. Therefore, the name Withering Flame was also not inappropriate. Meng Hao looked silently at the Reincarnation Demon Mountain in front of him. He had been most confident regarding the Frost Soil, and secondarily, the Blood Demon. The only mountain he had no confidence in was this Reincarnation Demon Mountain. If there was any destiny connecting him to this mountain, then at best it would be the technique he had acquired but not mastered in the second plane, the Withering Flame Demon Magic True Self Tao. Even as he hesitated, the Reincarnation Demon Mountain began to rumble of its own accord. Black smoke poured out from the fiery pit, rushing out to fill the sky, followed by endless flames. Next, a voice spoke out from within, ancient and emotionless. Reincarnation Mountain needs no bows. Many years ago, there was a withered slave on this mountain who said that life is pain, and that he wished to free himself from the sea of bitterness. That sea is like an inescapable flame which can burn everything. Afterwards, he called this place Withering Flame, and made a solemn vow that he would eradicate the sea of bitterness. He would ensure that all living things no longer experience bitterness, but rather freedom. If you were in his place, what would you do? Note from Urgen. This was actually posted as an entire chapter, as Urgen did not post any other chapters on that day. It snowed today quite heavily. After coming back from the funeral procession, I cried for a long time. I've never cried like that before, and I don't know why I did this time. I don't feel like writing now, nor do I want to do anything. I just want to have some peace and quiet. Brothers and sisters, this will be my last day off. I'll get back to work as usual tomorrow. Thank you for your understanding. Thank you.